Chapter 147. What do you think of this identity? With this discovery, Walker was able to relax and listen to Ivan's lectures, occasionally experimenting with spells Ivan had taught him. He began to admire Ivan more and more. He felt that none of the Durmstrang professors were as good as Ivan. At the very least, Ivan was able to improve the power of his charms in a very short period of time, something that he did not experience in school. However, Walker did not have the systematic blessing that Ivan did, and even if he knew what to do, it would take a lot of practice to master it. Ivan smiled at Walker's enthusiasm as he practiced the spell over and over again. His special instruction this time was also in the spirit of compensation. After all, Ivan had used the wolfsbane potion to analyze Walker's body structure over the past 2 days, claiming that it worked. Not only did it greatly increase the proficiency of the transfiguration charm, but it also confirmed that the werewolf form was a special type of animagus. This was because, as with Scabbers, the werewolf Walker's brain was protected by magic. The only difference between the two was that Walker's body was also filled with magic, as if his entire body had been animated by it. This reminded Ivan of the fast-moving tabby cat in the Forbidden Forest.
That's all for today. Practice it well for the next few days. When you have time, I'll teach you the casting techniques of the iron armor spell and the splitting spell.
That's all for today. Practice it well for the next few days. When you have time, I'll teach you the casting techniques of the iron armor spell and the splitting spell. When you are able to freely control the power of the charm, you may begin to learn about the thunderbolt explosion.
Are you really willing to teach me such a powerful spell?
Walker asked in disbelief. Despite Ivan's earlier promise, he thought it was an excuse.
Of course, if you live up to my standards.
Ivan nodded nonchalantly. In fact, the thunderbolt explosion charm was not that rare, as Hermione and Harry had used it in their 7th year in the original timeline. Not to mention blowing up an entire street like Peter Pettigrew, who could not even blow up a section of the wall. As he said before, the specific power of a charm varies from person to person.
Did you drink a hair-growing potion?
Yvonne asked with a strange look on her face. It didn't look like a permanent hair-growing potion, or Dugat wouldn't have waited until today to drink it. Doggett gave him a dirty look.
Just keep it to yourself. Why say it?
Doggett looked Ivan up and down and saw that he was only wearing ordinary wizarding robes.
Didn't I tell you to dress up? Is that what you're wearing?
Is it bad? I think it's a good outfit. Are we going to a party?
Yvonne raised her eyebrows.
Of course not,
said Doggett, shaking his head.
Isn't that right? We're poor wizards from Knockoff Alley. Although we're poor, we're still worried about the future of the wizarding world. Therefore, we've been researching in Knockoff Alley for many years, determined to solve the problem of werewolves going berserk.
Yvonne spoke eloquently, making Dugat stare at her blankly.
What do you think of the status of this pauper genius?
Dugat was so confused that it took him a while to follow Ivan's train of thought, and he wondered if he should change into his old clothes. Looking at Doggett's nonplussed expression, Yvonne smiled to herself. If the bastard likes to imagine things, then keep imagining things. Just as Ivan was feeling pleased with himself, he suddenly felt a chill behind him. He turned around and saw a dark-faced Alicia.
I can't remember a time in my life when I had trouble eating and dressing at home.
Alicia pinched Ivan's cheek. She then proceeded to undo Ivan's outer buttons, strip him of his normal wizard's robe, and replace it with another robe with intricate patterns.
It looks good.
After folding Ivan's sleeves, Alicia looked at the young wizard in front of her with satisfaction. Ivan waved his wand and conjured a mirror. As expected, clothes make the man. With a change of clothes, he actually looked like a noble wizard. She just felt a little restrained in this set of clothes, unlike her usual relaxed self.
Well,
Yvonne commented eventually, glancing at Alicia's half-smiling face and changing tack.
I mean, it's nice and impeccable.
It's about time, so we'll be on our way,
said Doggett, glancing at the clock and gesturing to Alicia. Yvonne nodded solemnly and felt a hand on her shoulder. There was a familiar tearing of space, and she heard Doggett's voice.
Phantom shift.
Chapter 148, Entering the Ministry of Magic. A moment later, ripples appeared in space, and two figures, one large and one small, appeared out of thin air. Ivan snapped out of his daze and looked around instinctively. Instead of the Ministry of Magic he had expected, he found himself in a narrow alley.
Why don't we just teleport to the ministry?
Yvonne asked curiously.
You can't just use apparition to get to the ministry unless you're authorized to do something important. Even if you're there, you have to go through another passageway to get to work.
Duggart explained, patting Ivan on the shoulder. Yvonne nodded. That made sense. If everyone used apparition to get around the ministry, it would be a mess. More importantly, it would undermine the dignity of the ministry.
Come with me, the entrance to the Ministry of Magic is just up the road. It's probably crowded, so we'd better dress up like muggles.
Doggett put away his wand, tidied his clothes, warned the others, and led the way. Pretend to be muggles. Do you know what muggles generally look like? Ivan grumbled to himself, but he still hurried to keep up. When he left the alley, he found himself in a busy street. There was a crowd of people, mostly men and women in suits and carrying briefcases. They seemed to be in a hurry and never stayed in one place for long. With Doggett leading the way, Ivan was able to blend in with the crowd, although his unusual attire attracted a lot of attention. Even so, Doggett thought he was putting on a good front, occasionally telling Ivan Muggle common sense, which, unfortunately, sounded outdated to Ivan. Dugster was so excited that he even wanted to show Ivan how to use a Muggle machine on a vending machine by the side of the road. However, nothing happened after he stuffed a silver sickle into the machine, and soon after, the machine vomited it back out.
Gotta admit, Muggle machines don't take sickles or nuts,
muttered Doggett, patting his head, suddenly remembering that he had forgotten to go to Gringotts for some Muggle currency today. After a short walk, they arrived at an ancient street with graffiti all over the walls. There were only a few shops and a small pub on either side of the street. Because of this, there were very few pedestrians, and only an occasional honking car drove past. In front of them was a red telephone booth. It was in such a state of disrepair that half of its red paint had fallen off. Doggett, however, didn't seem to care at all as he went in and beckoned Yvonne to join him. The small telephone booth was suddenly crowded.
It's a Muggle telephone booth, and it's said that Muggles can use it to communicate remotely, just like your extendable ears do. What do you think? Surprised, right? I thought it was unbelievable when I first found out.
Doggart smacked his lips, flaunting his Muggle knowledge and looking very pleased with himself. Ivan rolled his eyes in exasperation. It was just a telephone booth. He had used one in his previous life. Muggles even had mobile phones now, right? As she explained the situation to Ivan, Doggett picked up the receiver, tapped in the number, and entered 62,442. It wasn't long before Ivan heard a voice in his ear. It seemed to be very close, but there was no one in sight.
Welcome to the ministry. Please state your name and business.
It was a cold female voice, and Ivan couldn't help but wonder if the ministry receptionist's poor service attitude should have been greeted warmly. Doggett was used to it and did not find it amiss.
I'm Doggett, and this is Ivan Hals, the inventor of the Wolfsbane potion. We're going to the patent office. I'm sure you've been told.
The receptionist seemed surprised by Doggett's question and paused before continuing. Hello, guests, please keep your badges.
Well, stop looking. We have business to attend to.
Chapter 149, Meeting with Damocles Marcus. Ding,
It's been a long time, old friend.
said Doggett as he enthusiastically patted the middle-aged wizard on the back. When they parted, Doggett looked down at Ivan and made the introductions.
This is Director Stamp of the Patent Office, one of my best friends.
How do you do, Mr. Stamp?
Yvonne replied politely.
You're the one who invented the Wolfsbane potion. My God, even though Doggett mentioned your age in his letter, I always thought he was joking.
Stump looked at Ivan, who was at most 11 or 12 years old, and sounded surprised.
To tell you the truth, several of my old friends were rather reluctant to believe that a young wizard could have developed a potion that could cure wolf venom. You know, one would have to have studied werewolves very deeply.
But that's the truth, isn't it, Mr. Stump?
Yvonne interrupted, moving on.
Also, I don't think it's because the development of the wolf venom potion is too difficult, but because there are so few potion masters who care about the werewolf's current situation that no one has ever come up with a solution before.
Ivan's words caused Stamp some embarrassment. At that moment, there was a round of applause, accompanied by a deep voice.
Well said.
Ivan turned to see a young wizard praising him. He looked to be in his 30s and was probably the youngest person in the atrium besides Ivan. Before Ivan could question him, he spoke angrily.
You were right, the entire wizarding community is indifferent to the status quo of werewolves, believing them to be anomalies, troublemakers, and unstable elements.
It's been a long time, old friend, said Doggett as he enthusiastically patted the middle-aged wizard on the back. When they parted, Doggett looked down at Ivan and made the introductions. This is Director Stamp of the Patent Office, one of my best friends. How do you do, Mr. Stamp? Ivan replied politely. You're the one who invented the wolfsbane potion? My God, even though Doggett mentioned your age in his letter, I always thought he was joking.
By the way, I haven't introduced myself. I'm Damocles Marcus, a wizard researching werewolves.
How do you do, Mr. Marcus?
Ivan said casually, but she felt guilty. If he remembered correctly, this was the inventor of the wolf's bane potion from the original timeline, and Ivan never expected to see him here. The key was timing. Marcus should be able to develop the wolf's bane potion on his own before long. Ivan suddenly felt a headache coming on, and she was worried that he was out to get her. After all, no one would be happy to find out that someone had beaten them to it when they were about to produce results. However, to Ivan's surprise, Marcus was very friendly with him. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Marcus began to chat about the current state of the werewolves, as well as the werewolves' rioting conjectures.
You think a werewolf's transformation is a special kind of animagus?
Marcus asked, surprised. He had studied werewolves for many years and had seen them go on a rampage many times, but he had never thought of it in this way.
Yes, when I was at Hogwarts, Professor McGonagall, who taught Transfiguration, told me about the details of the animagus transformation.
It's been a long time, old friend, said Doggett as he enthusiastically patted the middle-aged wizard on the back. When they parted, Doggett looked down at Ivan and made the introductions. This is Director Stamp of the Patent Office, one of my best friends. How do you do, Mr. Stamp? Ivan replied politely. You're the one who invented the wolfsbane potion? My God, even though Doggett mentioned your age in his letter, I always thought he was joking.
It's a pity that the wolfsbane potion has such a duration. If it could be modified to allow the werewolf wizards to freely transfigure while maintaining their sanity, what would be the difference between that and an animagus transfiguration?
When Marcus heard this, he thought Ivan was being ridiculous and wanted to retort, but after careful consideration, he realized that it was possible.
If that were true, the wizarding community would be in an uproar.
Chapter 150, Dumbledore Uninvited.
Impressive.
Marcus exclaimed, genuinely impressed. Ivan faced Marcus, the true inventor of the wolfsbane potion, and was about to say something modest when Doggett interrupted her.
Geniuses are always out of reach.
Doggett sighed with emotion, attracting everyone's attention, then patted Ivan on the shoulder and bragged.
You may not know this, but Hals was able to identify all kinds of herbs at the age of 5 and brew some simple potions on his own at the age of 6.
Impressive, Marcus exclaimed, genuinely impressed. Ivan faced Marcus, the true inventor of the wolfsbane potion, and was about to say something modest when Doggett interrupted her. Geniuses are always out of reach.
Isn't he exaggerating a bit too much, trying to help him raise his reputation and get the title of genius?
However, when he turned around, he saw Marcus and Stump looking at him with admiration. Just as Doggett was about to continue, he suddenly stopped and looked away, his expression turning ugly. Ivan turned his head in confusion and saw an old man with a white beard. He was wearing a dark green robe and had a purple and blue badge on his shoulder. Before Ivan could think about the relationship between Doggett and the other man, his calm expression changed as he saw Dumbledore, the headmaster he had not seen for a long time, standing next to the man.
Albus, is this the talented young wizard you've been telling me about?
The old wizard asked Dumbledore with a smile. He seemed to have an unusually strong body, and his voice was full of energy.
If you hadn't kept assuring me, I wouldn't have believed a mere wizard could come up with a solution to the werewolf problem.
Headmaster Bohan, in truth, I am quite surprised at his accomplishments, but come to think of it, it seems that every time I see him, he gives me new surprises.
Dumbledore said briskly, turning to wink at Ivan.
It makes me look forward to the next time we meet. Who wants to meet you?
Ivan complained, although he pretended to be very polite. Professor Dumbledore, Dean Bohan, I was only able to brew the wolfsbane potion by accident, thanks to Mr. Douget's years of teaching. Without the information he compiled while researching werewolves, I would never have been able to brew it. Dean Bohan nodded noncommittally, then looked back at Doggart and spoke suspiciously.
I didn't know you'd been researching werewolves all these years, hiding in Knockturn Alley and causing trouble. That's surprising.
Dog snapped. Dean Bohan, however, did not seem to hear him. Instead, he struck up a conversation with Ivan, praising Ivan's efforts to sell the wolfsbane potion at a reduced price. Ivan was overwhelmed by her enthusiasm. He even wondered if this Dean Bohan was also a werewolf. Otherwise, why would he care so much about wolf venom? It didn't take long for Ivan to realize that he was imagining things. From their conversation, Ivan soon learned that St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries had hosted dozens of cases of werewolf bites and scratches over the years. By the time most arrived at the hospital, they had already missed the best time to be treated, and Bohan could only watch as they were transformed, unable to do anything about it. This was undoubtedly torture for the highly skilled Bohan. Ivan's wolfsbane potion could not cure werewolves, but it could reduce the number of werewolf riots and allow innocent werewolves to return to normal life.
Albus, I think Hales's contribution to the ministry was enough to earn him a second-class Order of Merlin. What do you think?
Said Dean Bohan with feeling.
Yes, I think so too. I'll write tomorrow and issue a nomination.
Dumbledore nodded and agreed without hesitation. Ivan was surprised that these two wizards were willing to nominate him for the Order of Merlin. On the way here, he had learned from Doggett that to be awarded the Order of Merlin, one had to make enough of a contribution, as well as a nomination. It is best if the nominee is a fellow recipient of the Order of Merlin, or someone with some influence in the wizarding community. Without a nominee, the Order of Merlin would have been automatically nominated, but efficiency was questionable. This was also the reason why Doggett sought out these people and desperately tried to help him boast about it, in order to find a reliable nominee.
Thank you, Professor Dumbledore, and of course you.
Yvonne said gratefully. He understood that he only had enough merit points to get a third-level Order of Merlin. To get a second-level Order of Merlin, he would have to rely on the influence of these two bigwigs. Although Ivan was not particularly fond of the Order of Merlin, he did not slight the two men who had helped him. Yvonne was about to thank him again when Dumbledore waved her off with a rare sigh.
No, I want to thank you, Hales. Your wolfsbane potion saved a werewolf friend of mine. He did many things for me in the past, but all those years of poverty as a werewolf wizard left me powerless to do anything but watch.
Chapter 151. Sorry, this is the developer of the wolf poison potion. The small talk with Dumbledore did not last long, and it is worth noting that Ivan found Doggett to be invisible throughout the conversation, his dark face showing no intention of interrupting. When Dean Bohan and Dumbledore were out of earshot, Doggett stepped forward and patted Ivan on the shoulder.
It's been hard on you,
said Doggett wistfully. Yvonne did not understand the meaning of Douget's words, but she could see that he had a terrible relationship with Dean Bohan, and she wondered why he had invited her.
I did not invite these two. They came of their own accord,
said Doggett gloomily, as if he had seen Ivan's confusion.
Let's go, I'll introduce you to a few more friends,
said Doggett, quickly collecting himself and dragging Ivan away to talk to the remaining wizards. It was at this point that Ivan realized how popular Doggett was, with many of the wizards present being high-ranking Ministry of Magic officials, some of whom were even core members of the Order of Merlin. The meeting in the atrium lasted for several hours, and Ivan, who was smiling the entire time, felt like he was going to faint from laughter.
How much longer are we going to be here?
Ivan asked unhappily, rubbing his sore cheeks.
Till the evening, of course. Did you forget it's the full moon?
Said Doggett, smiling at the well-dressed wizards around him. Although your wolfsbane potion has been authenticated by the Ministry of Magic and its effects have been confirmed, a werewolf must be found to see for himself.
This must be the inventor of the wolfsbane potion. I must say, the potion you've developed has changed the survival of werewolves to some extent and contributed greatly to the wizarding community.
Fudge enthusiastically tried to shake Doggett's hand, but Doggett did not respond, instead pointing an embarrassed finger at Ivan.
Minister Fudge, this is the one who developed the wolfsbane potion.
Fudge's smile immediately froze, and his hand froze in midair. On the court, the only sound was that of the camera, faithfully recording this rare scene. A middle-aged witch in magenta robes was beside herself with excitement. She scribbled furiously on a piece of parchment, thinking that this would definitely make the headlines tomorrow. If this article were to pass muster.
Minister Fudge, how are you? I'm Ivan Howells, the inventor of the wolfsbane potion. I believe we've met before.
Ivan paused for a moment before continuing.
In addition, you were correct to say that Mr. Duguet was my initiator in the field of potions, and it was with his help that I was able to develop the wolfsbane potion. In a sense, he was one of the developers of the potion. Ah, yes.
Fudge was quick to adjust, shaking Ivan's hand vigorously and making good on his promise. At the same time, his gaze drifted to one of the clerks, but he turned back in time with the flash of the camera lens and looked at Ivan with admiration. Ivan did not seem to mind the change in Fudge's attitude. He was only trying to help because he was worried that Fudge might be petty and hold a grudge against them for embarrassing himself in public. Fudge, however, became more interested in Ivan, especially when he heard from the chief executive that the ministry had recently purchased magical supplies from Ivan's family's magical shop. When it was time, Fudge suggested that they go to the observation room to test the effects of the wolfsbane potion. Ivan readily agreed. He had long since given up on staying there. Thus, the group quickly moved to the observation room downstairs, where there was ample security to prevent any accidents. The potion tester was an ordinary-looking werewolf wizard who, to Ivan's surprise, worked for the Ministry of Magic.
Werewolves are allowed to work in the ministry.
Ivan whispered to Doggart.
Of course, the Ministry of Magic reserved them a position in the Department of Sports, where they did all the odd jobs, and when the werewolf couldn't take it anymore, the ministry would hire another werewolf to do the same job.
Chapter 152, Rita Skeeter's Interview. When Ivan saw Rita Skeeter, he knew he was in trouble. As expected, Rita Skeeter pushed her way through the crowd, fiddled with her curly hair, and leaned forward to stare at Ivan.
Hello, Mr. Harles. I'm Rita Skeeter from the Daily Prophet. You may call me Mrs. Skeeter.
Yvonne frowned, not wanting to bother with the old woman, knowing full well that whatever she said would be made up. Fortunately, Duguet stepped in and glared at Rita, his voice full of displeasure.
If you wish to interview him, please do so after the experiment is complete. Until then, he will not have time to answer your questions.
Rita Skeeter tried to ignore him, but Doggett stood in the middle of the room like an iron tower, refusing to back down. Rita Skeeter had to put her quill away, but before she left, she said to Ivan,
Well, I'll have an exclusive interview later. I mean, if your wolfsbane potion works.
With that, Rita Skeeter sashayed away. I didn't expect the Daily Prophet to send this woman for an interview. She's not easy to deal with.
Then why did you agree to her interview on my behalf? Why didn't you just refuse?
Ivan asked in confusion. He was not interested in cooperating with this difficult woman.
The Daily Prophet is the largest newspaper in the wizarding world, and it's best not to get on the wrong side of it. Besides, it's not as if they won't write about you if you don't give interviews.
Duggart explained. After a pause, Doggett continued.
And I've heard that this guy can be bought. You might be able to start with that.
Ivan muttered to himself.
Then I'd have to have that much galleon.
After a short conversation, Ivan walked up to the viewing platform, which looked like a small amphitheater. The stands were raised high on all sides, and in the middle was a flat, empty space. The werewolf wizard was already standing there, looking nervous. He gestured to the crowd and drank the dark brown potion in one gulp. Yvonne looked at the clock in the distance, 5 minutes to midnight. As time drew closer, the aurors guarding the area tightened their grip on their wands and kept their eyes on the figure on the platform, ready to subdue him if he went berserk. The werewolf wizard was sharp enough to notice this and made a sour face, although he was grateful when he turned to Ivan. 5 minutes passed slowly under the watchful eyes of the crowd. The werewolf wizard suddenly began to tremble, and his body began to lengthen. Hair began to grow out of his thin arms, and his nails became sharp and thin.
It seems that werewolves are not as terrifying as they are reputed to be, and it is not known why adult wizards are attacked by werewolves every year.
Stump shook his head in disappointment at the terrified look on the faces of the werewolves, which was not what he had expected from a werewolf.
That's because of the effects of the wolfsbane potion. Either individually or by now the werewolf will have your throat.
Marcus rudely interrupted Stump's reverie. As a wizard who had dealt with a large number of werewolves at close range, Marcus was well aware of how difficult and terrifying werewolves could be, and he could not bear to listen to Stump's nonsense. The two soon got into an argument, attracting the attention of the nearby wizards. Ivan's attention was elsewhere. He was staring at the people in the front row. They were the ones who could make the decisions. Dumbledore's deep blue eyes under his half-moon spectacles examined the werewolf carefully, as if to confirm his status, and then he spoke first.
It would seem that Mr. Harles's wolfsbane potion was very successful.
Fudge nodded with satisfaction. He knew little about werewolves, but he had seen one crouching and shivering like a dog. That was enough, wasn't it? Dean Bohan, on the other hand, was the first to approach the werewolf. He ignored the guards' attempts to stop him and ran over to the werewolf wizard to ask about his condition. The lights of the cameras flashed all around, and Rita Skeeter took out her quill to write something down. She even tried to get in for an interview. After waiting a little longer to be sure that the werewolf had lost all sense of aggression, Fudge strolled up to the stage and cordially met with the werewolf wizard, and after a long, boring speech, Fudge smiled and clasped the werewolf's hand, concluding that a werewolf wizard was no different from a normal wizard, a part of the wizarding community. Ivan wondered maliciously if the minister would still be able to laugh if the werewolf wizard on stage suddenly lost control and infected Fudge. Unfortunately, his wolfsbane potion was effective, and the werewolf did not have the courage to attack the minister. After leaving the venue, Ivan followed Duggart to the patent office on the 7th floor to register the wolfsbane potion. When he opened the door, he saw Rita Skeeter waiting for him.
So, Mr. Ivan Howells, our little genius, may we begin the interview?
Rita Skeeter asked with a smile.
If you want to know something, of course.
Chapter 153, we can sit down and have a good talk now. Having been granted an exclusive interview, the pair sat down in an uninterrupted interview room. Rita Skeeter eagerly took a roll of parchment and a shorthand quill from her crocodile skin handbag. She set them aside and looked at Ivan with a sweet smile.
I'm used to making notes with a shorthand quill. You won't object, will you, so that I can talk to you without being distracted?
No, I object.
Ivan said without hesitation.
That's good.
Rita Skeeter replied automatically, then realized what Ivan was talking about and her smile froze. She never expected the person being interviewed to say that.
Objection, why?
Rita managed to keep a professional smile on her face as she enunciated each word. Ivan looked at her suspiciously, tapping his fingers on the table as he spoke.
Mrs. Skeeter, this is so unethical that I have to wonder if you have to rely on this bewitched quill to write a decent article.
Perhaps I could report this to the editor-in-chief of the Daily Prophet and have them hire your quill as a reporter.
Yvonne said, not giving Rita any face. When Ivan saw her take out her shorthand quill, he knew that this interview would not be a peaceful one. This was because the pen was Rita Skeeter's most important.
Magical treasure.
It was most adept at embellishing the words of the interviewee into various explosive content. It was even better than Rita Skeeter herself. Rita Skeeter was so furious that, under Ivan's suspicious gaze, she was forced to retrieve a new quill from her bag. No one could question her professionalism. Rita took a few deep breaths to calm herself and smiled.
Shall we begin now, Mr. Harles?
Of course, there's no problem with that.
Ivan nodded, thinking that Rita probably didn't have a second shorthand quill.
So the first question is, how did you come up with the idea of researching wolf venom?
Rita asked.
The Knockturn Alley is a place where werewolf wizards and witches gather. I've been in contact with them often and understood their predicament, which led me to come up with the idea of developing a wolf venom potion.
Ivan carefully weighed his words, trying to make them as clear as possible in short sentences so that the other party would not catch on.
You've been around werewolves a lot. Why? What would put you at such risk?
Rita Skeeter immediately found her interest in Ivan's words, and her eyes lit up as her heavily made-up face moved closer to his.
Is this about your little werewolf girlfriend?
Within a short period of time, Rita Skeeter had conjured up a poignant love story, and her hands were shaking as she held her quill pen and desperately wanted to write something.
I don't have any female werewolves among my friends.
Ivan interrupted, rolling his eyes. Rita Skeeter was disappointed. She had a story in mind, but she could not write it.
Did you have any other romantic experiences at school?
Ivan shook his head without hesitation, trying to put an end to the last of Rita Skeeter's nonsense. However, Ivan severely underestimated Rita Skeeter's ability to bullshit, as she did not care what anyone said, and was able to piece together the sentences she wanted with only a few words. The eagle-eyed Ivan clearly saw Rita Skeeter scribbling on the parchment with her quill. Ivan Howells was very concerned about male werewolves and was ashamed to mention his love history, as if he had something to hide.
Mrs. Skeeter, I must remind you that I'm only in my second year next year, and I'm afraid you don't have much credibility with your love history.
Yvonne retorted, trying to contain her anger.
Like this.
Rita nodded thoughtfully, crossing out the sentences she had written. Ivan was relieved when Rita continued writing. The potion genius Ivan Howells was desperate for love, but his young age caused him to suffer setbacks in his quest for love, and he ended up with a werewolf.
Okay, that's it for today's interview.
Rita Skeeter asked, nodding in satisfaction at the parchment she had brought with her. As Rita Skeeter was packing her crocodile skin handbag and standing up to leave, Ivan, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly spoke.
Mrs. Skeeter, please wait a moment.
Rita Skeeter paused and looked away, but then Ivan continued.
Or should I call you the illegal animagus transfiguration, Madam Beetle?
Rita Skeeter shuddered and stared at Ivan in disbelief, but then her lips curled into a fake smile.
I'm not sure what you mean, Mr. Harles.
Rita Skeeter said, feigning calm.
Really, as long as I understand.
Ivan said casually, raising his eyebrows and looking at her playfully. Rita Skeeter was unsure if Ivan was trying to trick her, but when she thought about it, it seemed impossible, as Ivan had correctly identified her animagus transformation as a beetle. But no one should know this secret.
There's no such thing as an absolute secret, is there?
Said Ivan, changing his expression and indicating the seat in front of him.
I think we can sit down and talk about this now.
Chapter 154, How much did you pay that reporter? Rita Skeeter hesitated, then reluctantly sat down, worried that Ivan had some sort of conclusive evidence. In fact, even without proof, Ivan could cause her a great deal of trouble simply by reporting her to the ministry. After all, in order to write explosive articles, she had used her animagus form to track the interviewees and sneak into their homes to gather confidential information. This was not only a breach of ministry regulations, but also an offense against a large number of reputable wizards, and Ivan would most likely have her locked up in Azkaban if her illegal identity as an animagus had been revealed.
Where's the parchment?
Ivan said, his tone heavy. Rita Skeeter fumbled for her crocodile skin handbag, but when she took it out, Ivan grabbed it from her. Seeing the nonsense on the parchment, Ivan tore it to shreds in front of Rita Skeeter.
So,
Rita Skeeter's eyes widened and her lips trembled as she tried to speak, but she swallowed her words under Ivan's cold gaze.
Reprint it, I'm watching.
Ivan said, tapping the table. Rita Skeeter hesitated, then reluctantly took out a fresh roll of parchment and started writing again. Under Ivan's intense gaze, Rita Skeeter struggled to come up with various compliments. At first, it didn't go well, but after a few paragraphs, Rita Skeeter seemed to have found inspiration. The more she wrote, the more excited she became. Eventually, she let loose completely.
Ahem.
Ivan couldn't help but cough. Rita Skeeter, who was in the middle of writing, looked up at Ivan suspiciously.
I think what you've written needs a bit of revision.
Ivan reminded him laconically. Correction, Rita Skeeter did not quite understand the meaning of Ivan's words, but then it dawned on her. She must not have been flattering him enough. Thinking of this, Rita Skeeter decided that she would have to polish it up a bit more to please him when she got back. When they came out of the interview room, Doggett was talking to Director Stamp of the Patent Office. When he saw Rita Skeeter shake Ivan's hand with a fake smile on her face, he felt as if he had met his nemesis and fled without looking back. He immediately became worried and turned to Ivan.
Did you offend that old woman? She's not exactly known for her big heart.
Ivan said, shrugging. Doggett was curious as to why Ivan was so confident. He knew something about Rita Skeeter. As the Daily Prophet's most famous journalist, Rita Skeeter was an expert at digging up juicy tidbits, and the people she targeted were often caught up in trouble and gossip, which nobody knew how Rita Skeeter learned about. Ivan shook his head, unwilling to divulge any more information than necessary. The only reason he was able to restrain Rita Skeeter was because he had read the book and knew her weakness. Doggett had to swallow his curiosity and lead him away from the ministry. It was nearly dawn when they arrived home. Ivan sent Doggett away, briefly explained to Alicia that the trip had gone well, and then lay down to sleep. On Wednesday morning, Ivan was yawning over breakfast when he saw a flock of owls flying in through the front door, windows, and fireplace. Was there an owl disaster in the house? Before Yvonne could comprehend what was happening, countless envelopes began to fall from the sky, piling up so high they threatened to drown the table, along with owl feathers. In addition to the envelope, Ivan's sharp eyes caught sight of a newspaper in the mix, and he reached out to take it. The newspaper's front-page photo was the one he took with Fudge before they left the viewing room. After that was Rita Skeeter's article, which Yvonne read through carefully, only to find that not only did she not listen to her, but she even exaggerated it. Yvonne had to admit, though, that Rita Skeeter was quite the writer. With just a few paragraphs, he was able to put his potion talent image on paper, and with Rita Skeeter's last-minute, touching stories, Ivan was moved to tears.
What the hell is going on?
Alicia came out of the kitchen with her cookware and stared at the envelopes.
Well, I don't know exactly, maybe because of that.
Ivan waved the Daily Prophet. Alicia picked it up curiously and studied it for a while, her expression growing odd.
How much did you actually pay that reporter? How much did she speak up for you?
He didn't give me a single copper, so maybe the Daily Prophet reporter thought I was one of those people.
Ivan shrugged innocently. Alicia smiled and pinched Ivan's cheek. She didn't believe a word of it.
These letters can't all be pretty much the same, can they? And when do they go back to?
Ivan asked, staring at the pile of letters in front of him with a headache.
A lot of people wouldn't get the chance to do that.
Chapter 155, Booklist and Flourish in Blots. With the aid of answering quills, the efficiency of answering letters was increased several times over, and Ivan only had to open the envelope once, look at it, and put it aside, and the quills on the table would begin to write a reply. Even so, it took Ivan all morning. When she opened the last envelope, she found it was from the school, unlike the others. He was told to catch the train to King's Cross Station on 1 September, along with a list of books for his second year. Yvonne scanned the pages briefly. Aside from a few professional books for each subject, there were 7 copies of Lockhart's book, each more expensive than the last. Yvonne suddenly understood who would be teaching defense against the dark arts next term. However, he was also amazed by Lockhart's shamelessness. He actually used his status as a professor to get Hogwarts students to sell more books.
Mom, you might have to give me more galleons. This year's books are especially expensive. They might cost dozens of galleons.
Looking at the price tag, Ivan sighed and had to ask for help. He had attracted a lot of business for his family's wizarding shop, but it was Acacia who had been paid, and he had not been able to get his hands on any of it.
Dozens of galleons, that's expensive.
Alicia, who was helping to collect the replies, curiously took the list and scanned it.
Gilderoy Lockhart,
Said Alicia in surprise.
Do you know him, Mom?
Ivan had a bad feeling about this. If he remembered correctly, Lockhart seemed to be a friend of women and had many fans in the wizarding world. Fortunately, Ivan soon saw Alicia shake her head.
No, I don't. I've only heard a little about him. I've heard he's quite a character and that his books are well-known and well-known. Looks like you have a good defense against the dark arts professor next year.
Said Alicia with a smile. Ivan pursed his lips.
He's a bit of a knockoff, but he's good at the memory charm.
Ivan, however, did not mention that he would be exposed once he became a professor next year, and that he would probably be in trouble if not for his memory loss from the basilisk incident. Alicia helped Ivan with his list, then took 100 galleons from the cupboard, put them in an enchanted bag and handed it to Ivan.
This should be enough, you can use the rest at school.
Alicia said generously. 100 galleons was a lot of money, and if it weren't for Ivan's unusual behavior during the summer holidays and the fact that he never squandered his money, Alicia would never have trusted a child with it. As a matter of fact, Isaiah wanted to simply close the shop for half a day and take Ivan on a tour of Diagon Alley, but Ivan refused. Ivan didn't go to Flourish and Blots just to buy books. More importantly, one of the ways he remembered how to get GPA was to read all of the wizarding books. As long as one's reading progress reached 100%, one would be able to obtain a student status reward that was equivalent to the difficulty level and could also improve one's magic knowledge. It was killing two birds with one stone. Thus, Ivan planned to spend the rest of the school year at Flourish and Blots, reading as much as he could. Alicia, of course, could not stay out of business for more than a few days, especially now that business was on the upswing, so resignedly dismissed the idea of accompanying her.
Why don't you let Dugat go with you for a few days?
Alicia was more or less worried about Ivan going through Nocturne Alley alone.
No, I'd rather drink Polyjuice potion and go alone.
Ivan shook his head firmly. He'd had enough of that bastard Doggett, and nothing good ever came out of going out with him except that time at the ministry.
Very well, then.
Isaiah agreed with a sigh, unable to resist Ivan's firmness, but then added a cautionary note.
Do not go out in my form.
Ivan nodded. He was not in the habit of turning into the opposite sex. Back in his room, Ivan took out the Polyjuice potion that he had brewed earlier and placed in his drawer. With that in mind, Ivan added a strand of hair he had collected and took a small sip, presumably enough to get him out of Nocturne Alley. The next moment, Ivan felt as if his entire body was being torn apart, and waves of itchiness spread throughout his body. Then, his bones were dislocated, his skin stretched, and his robes, which had originally fitted him perfectly, burst open. Ivan felt that he had miscalculated. He had forgotten that his clothes would burst if he transformed. He should have been prepared. Fortunately, this small matter was not a problem for Ivan, whose transfiguration was close to level 5. With a wave of his wand, his torn clothes were quickly restored, and then they became much wider and larger under the effects of the transfiguration charm. After putting her clothes back on, Ivan stood in front of the mirror again, looking at a freckled young man of 17 or 18 who looked exactly like Walker. He chose to become Walker because he could not reach many people each day, and only collected Asia's, Doggett's, and Walker's hair. He had no intention of morphing into the middle-aged Duggart, so the only option was this.
I'll see you later, Mom.
Ivan said to Alicia, who was still in the mail. Alicia turned to face the young wizard, who appeared to be 17 or 18 years old. She had a strange expression on her face, but she nodded. This was also the reason why Alicia didn't want Ivan to become her. Alone in the streets of Nocturne Alley, Ivan experienced another experience, one in which there seemed to be a certain malevolence all around him. Along the way, Ivan was accosted by several strangers, some of whom tried to sell him various goods, and others who invited him to some place. Chapter 160. 160 Let us go, brother will take you to a good place 3 years ago. Chapter 156. Let's go.
I am not lost, madame. The place I wish to go is over there.
Flustered at the junction of Knockturn Alley and the crossroads, Harry grabbed his captured right hand and tried to deny it.
It doesn't matter, my dear, I can take you. Are you going home? Then come with me.
The old witch grinned, revealing her mossy teeth. She spoke gently, as kind as a grandmother next door. Harry, however, felt a chill run down his spine. The man's skinny arms were surprisingly strong as they grabbed him by the shoulders and pulled him towards the inside of Knockturn Alley. Harry had no idea what would happen to him if he was taken away, but he knew that nothing good would come of it, so he looked around at the wizards for help. However, to Harry's surprise, none of the wizards around him paid him any attention, and he even caught sight of a couple of wizards in ragged robes, squatting in a corner and smiling at him, though with more than a hint of special meaning.
Ma'am, I don't even know you.
Harry tried to convince the old witch to let him go, regretting his choice of words when using flue powder or the fact that he should never have used the fireplace.
Soon we will know each other.
The elderly witch said with a strange smile as she gently patted Harry's cheek with her wand-wielding right hand.
Harry, what are you doing here?
Just as Harry was beginning to despair, there was a noise behind him and the two of them turned to see who it was. While he was hesitating, the young wizard walked up to him and placed his hand on Harry's other shoulder. Harry felt as if his body was about to be torn apart by the two of them.
Madam, my friend is here to fetch me. Will you release me now?
Harry did not know who the young wizard in front of him was, but he could tell that he was here to save him, so he decided to side with him.
Rascal, don't.
The old witch frowned at the young man and was about to curse him when Ivan suddenly attacked.
Expel Irmus.
The red magical light hit the old witch and she was thrown back against the wall behind her. A strange-looking wand flew out of her hand and landed in Ivan's hand. The fall was so hard that the old witch felt as if her bones were about to fall apart. It took her a while to recover, and she was furious. She did not expect an 18-year-old brat to attack her, so she was caught off guard. The elderly witch immediately reached into her robes for something, but not before Ivan's wand was pointed at her nose. Black magic gathered at the tip of the wand, ready to burst forth at any moment.
If you move, I'll cut your hand off.
Ivan warned, his eyes fixed on the old witch's hand. Ivan knew very well that he was not as intimidating as Hagrid, and that he had to use more direct and forceful means to force the other party to accept the truth. The elderly witch glared angrily at Ivan, but didn't dare to do anything rash. She would have bet against a lesser wizard of average age. However, Ivan's performance just now showed her that he was really going to be ruthless. Ivan threw the wand he had just captured into a distant alley, where it landed at the feet of a broken wizard lying on the ground.
Go away, you'd better not let me see you again.
Losing her wand and being pointed at by the other party's wand, the old witch had no choice but to get up from the ground and leave. When she saw that the wand that had been thrown into another alley had been picked up by someone, her expression changed and she hurriedly chased after them. Harry was relieved to see this, but did not forget to thank the helpful young wizard.
Thank you, sir.
Seeing the change in Harry's expression, Yvonne wanted to show him the cruelties of the wizarding world.
Don't thank me so quickly, brat. Yes, sir.
Harry stammered as he watched the young wizard's expression change. Ivan was amused by Harry's fear and tried his best not to laugh, but in the end, he couldn't help but laugh.
Come on, I'll show you somewhere nice.
With that, Ivan began to push Harry forward, causing him to panic even more, fearing that he would die today and praying that someone would come to his rescue. However, it was clear that fate did not favor one person twice in a row, and Harry went all the way without a second savior. Harry's only relief was that they were at least heading in the direction of Diagon Alley. Harry's nerves relaxed a little when he stepped out of the dark nocturne alley into the busy Diagon alley, but not for long, as he soon found out that the strange young wizard was pulling him into the middle of nowhere. As Harry braced himself to shout, the young wizard tapped his wand on his shirt. Harry was still wondering when his eyes widened. This was because he could clearly see that the young wizard in front of him was shrinking, becoming shorter and shorter, and his freckled face had changed into another appearance that he was very familiar with. His clothes shrank in tandem with his body, and it did not take long for him to become a young wizard of his own size.
Ivan!
Harry stared at her in shock.
Hi Harry, it's been a while.
Ivan said, turning around to greet Harry after he removed the transfiguration charm.
What's going on? How did you?
Harry's brain was failing him, and his words were coming out in a jumble.
It's the effect of Polyjuice potion,
Ivan explained. Harry nodded, then remembered how frightened he had been to walk with Ivan, and puffed out his cheeks in anger.
Then why didn't you tell me? I thought I was going to be kidnapped.
Chapter 157, Can We Go to Nocturne Alley? Ivan calmly explained the situation to an angry Harry.
Harry, Nocturne Alley is a dangerous place, as you've just seen.
Harry, Nocturne Alley is a dangerous place, as you've just seen. The person I transform into is young and not very intimidating. If I bring you along, I'll be easily targeted, so I might as well act fierce and bad.
Like this?
Harry asked dubiously.
Of course.
Yvonne said with conviction. Harry had a vague feeling that Ivan was bluffing, but could find no evidence of it.
By the way, Harry, how did you end up in Nocturne Alley?
Yvonne asked, quickly changing the subject. Harry had no intention of hiding the truth from her, and told her about his accidental use of flu powder and how he choked on the soot and mispronounced the words. Ivan nodded. He did not seem to have changed much from the book, except for the fact that he did not encounter Hagrid. After thinking about it for a while, Ivan realized that Hagrid had met Harry because he happened to be shopping in Nocturne Alley, and the two parties' routes of action diverged at the slightest mistake, presumably due to some sort of butterfly effect caused by him sending letters to George and Fred. It was a good thing that Harry had been lucky enough to bump into him, or the savior of the wizarding world would have died. Harry's mind was full of questions, such as what Ivan was doing in Nocturne Alley and why he looked like that. As they walked, Harry voiced the questions that had been bothering him.
Why?
Yvonne said to Harry, stopping in her tracks.
Because my house is in Nocturne Alley, it's not safe for me to go out and buy books for next year because I'm too young, so I'm using Polyjuice potion to make myself look intimidating.
You live in such a dangerous place. Why don't you move somewhere else?
Harry looked at Yvonne in astonishment, unable to understand why she lived in such a place. He had only been inside for a short while, but even so, he had already experienced the indifference and danger of Nocturne Alley. He had almost been dragged away in the street, so he was a little traumatized by Nocturne Alley.
Of course it's because he's poor.
Ivan said, rolling his eyes. Who the hell would want to be there if he made enough galleons? Harry fell silent and looked at Ivan with pity in his eyes. Until then, Harry had considered living in his uncle's house the worst thing in the world. However, after seeing these people in Nocturne Alley, Harry suddenly felt that his living conditions might not be too bad. At least there would be no one there to attempt to kidnap him, let alone have to travel in someone else's appearance. Remembering that he still had a large inheritance from his parents, Harry wondered if he should use it to help his best friends, perhaps by lending it to them. When Harry decided to ask, Ivan shook his head in amusement, then turned to Harry.
Haven't you read the Daily Prophet? I've made a new potion that's selling very well. The orders I received today are going to flood my house. It won't be long before I can move out.
Harry nodded, remembering how Mr. Weasley had been stunned to read the Daily Prophet in the morning and had even held it out for everyone to see. Harry also saw the newspaper article, which featured a photo of Ivan with the Minister for Magic on the front page, stating that Ivan had made a great contribution to the wizarding community by inventing a potion that cured werewolves. Unfortunately, she did not know much about the wizarding world or the value of the potion. However, he was told by George and Fred that Ivan would surely receive something called the Order of Merlin, which Mrs. Weasley found highly unlikely, as Ivan was too young to have ever been awarded in his year. The three of them argued about this for several hours and almost lost their way to Diagon Alley. On the way to Flourish and Blots, Harry told Yvonne about his adventures at the Burrow and asked her about them out of curiosity.
What's the Order of Merlin? Everyone seems to care about it.
It's just a token thing, it's not very useful.
Yvonne said dismissively. Harry was not convinced, as Mr. Weasley was very envious of the Order of Merlin, and Percy was even more jealous, declaring that he would get it in a few years.
Ivan.
When they arrived at Gringotts, they were surprised to see a young witch with fluffy hair greeting them.
Hermione.
Yvonne changed course, and the little witch hurried down the steps and gave him a hug before breaking away and chattering away.
I wrote so many letters to you over the summer, but I didn't know where you lived, and I wrote to Harry meaning to ask him, but he never replied.
At this, Hermione became angry, as Ivan had not sent her a single letter all summer, not even to Harry, whom she claimed lived somewhere. Harry hurried to explain, revealing Dobby's attempt to intercept the envelope. Ivan, on the other hand, was at a loss for words. Too much had happened to him during the summer holidays, and he had been so busy all day that he had completely forgotten about it. However, seeing Hermione's anger, Ivan had to use his brain to think of a reason, and the Weasleys, who were looking for Harry, came to distract her.
Harry, where were you?
Mr. Weasley gasped.
We couldn't find you for ages, and Molly was frantic.
George, Ron, Fred, and the others noticed Ivan and greeted him happily. Harry also used this time to get himself into Knockturn Alley, where he was nearly dragged away and rescued by Ivan. The main point was that Ivan knocked out the wicked old witch, who fled in terror.
Cool, that's you.
George exclaimed at the sight of Ivan, thinking it must have been a fantastic adventure. Fred, eager to experience the thrill of it, spoke to Ivan.
We've been meaning to visit Knockturn Alley for a while. It's just a shame that Mummy never lets us near it. Can we go to your house then?
Chapter 158. The most evil dark wizards live in Knockturn Alley. Visiting Knockturn Alley. Ivan looked at the two men, who were burning with the desire to die, and tried to refuse, but was beaten to the punch by Mrs. Weasley's angry roar.
How can you think that?
From a distance, Mrs. Weasley heard George and Fred's death-seeking speech, so she came up and smacked them on the head.
The Knockturn Alley is the most dangerous place in the wizarding world. It is full of the worst dark wizards.
Mum, how can you say that? Ivan lives in Knockturn Alley.
George retorted, covering his head with his hands. It was only then that Mrs. Weasley noticed Ivan's presence and became flustered.
Oh, sorry, kid, I didn't mean. It's all right,
said Ivan, shaking his head to show that he didn't mind, and turning to George and Weasley.
Mrs. Weasley was right. Knockturn Alley is dangerous and not a place you can just go.
The pair were dubious, but Ivan's refusal prevented them from inquiring about Knockturn Alley. George thought of something and took out the Daily Prophet from his pocket.
Ivan, we read in the paper this morning about you developing the Wolfsbane potion, and there was a picture of you with Minister for Magic. Is that true? We told Mom you'd definitely win the Order of Merlin, but she didn't believe us.
All eyes turned to Ivan, curious as to whether he was telling the truth. Ivan nodded casually and said,
Yes, I was nominated for the Order of Merlin for the development of the wolf venom potion, and Professor Dumbledore is willing to be my nominee.
George exclaimed. With Dumbledore as the nominee, Yvonne was almost certain to win the Order of Merlin. Fred turned to look at Mrs. Weasley.
Mom, we told you Ivan would make it.
I heard.
Mrs. Weasley rolled her eyes and snapped. She had nothing against Ivan, other than the fact that George and Fred often used him as an excuse to get into an argument with each other over their nonsense joke merchandise.
The Order of Merlin, what's that?
Asked Hermione's father, Mr. Granger, who was listening in on the conversation.
It's an award from the wizarding community, the highest of honors. Everyone who wins it has done the wizarding community a great service.
Arthur explained, giving Ivan an appreciative look. Hale's potion solved the problem of werewolf riots that plagued the wizarding community and was nominated for the Order of Merlin.
The same as our Nobel Prize. That's amazing.
Mr. Granger exclaimed when he saw that Ivan was only the same age as his daughter.
A Nobel Prize, what's that?
It was the Weasleys' turn to be baffled. It must be said that the generation gap between wizards and muggles was quite large, but thanks to Hermione, who was the go-between, everyone soon understood.
Well,
Arthur considered muggle awards to be inferior to wizarding ones, but there were some similarities in their nature.
Ivan, I can't believe you're doing something so important over the summer. I was wrong about you.
Hermione said sheepishly, turning to Ivan. As she had not read today's papers, Hermione had no idea Ivan had done such a terrible thing. She felt Ivan must have been too busy researching wolfsbane potions to write to her during the summer holidays. Hermione had read about werewolves in books, which were ferocious creatures who lost their minds every full night and transformed into monsters to attack the innocent. Yvonne immediately followed Hermione's lead and nodded, indicating that she was the type of person who couldn't stop working for the peace of the wizarding community. The group chatted and laughed as they headed to Flourish and Blots. Along the way, George and Fred tried to talk to Ivan about opening a joke shop next year, but Mrs. Weasley watched them too closely to allow them to discuss practical jokes. Ivan was slightly surprised when Arthur initiated a conversation with him, even asking about his family. After a brief response, Ivan asked curiously,
Do you know my mother's?
well,
Arthur hesitated.
but I have had some dealings with your father.
My father, can you tell me who he is? My mother never told me that.
Yvonne asked, suddenly interested. Even though Ivan was an imposter who had crossed over halfway through his life and did not care much for his father, it would be a lie to say that he was not curious.
How could Alicia do this? She kept it from you for over 10 years because of that.
Mrs. Weasley exclaimed in disbelief as she realized who Ivan's father was.
Did my father do something bad?
Yvonne asked, frowning at the confusion.
No, not at all.
Mrs. Weasley said gently, looking at Ivan with more pity than before.
Child, don't ever think that. Your father never did anything wrong. He was a hero. Mrs. Weasley, would you mind telling me about it?
Yvonne asked, feeling even more strange now. If that was the case, Alicia had no reason not to tell him.
Of course.
Mrs. Weasley began without hesitation, but Arthur cut her off.
Molly, that at least should not come from us.
Arthur then turned to Ivan and said apologetically,
If you want to know more, child, I suggest you ask your mother, Alicia. Otherwise, you can ask Dumbledore when you go to school, and they will know everything.
Ivan rolled his eyes.
Why would I ask you if Alicia was willing to talk?
Chapter 159, Are You the One Who Stole My Headline? After some communication, although Arthur refused to talk about it any further, Ivan was able to obtain some information about his parentage. However, the more information he received, the more suspicious he became.
Oh my God, it's Mr. Lockhart's book signing. What a coincidence we're here.
Hermione shrieked at the banner hanging in the upstairs window. Ivan looked in the direction Hermione was looking and saw that the banner was signed by Gilderoy Lockhart, selling his autobiography, Magical Me, this afternoon.
Gilderoy Lockhart, who's that?
Harry asked, looking at the crowd outside the bookshop.
You didn't know about him.
Hermione was shocked and then went on like a shot.
He wrote most of the books we're buying this year. I bet the new professor is a huge fan of Lockhart's.
Hermione went on to introduce them to Gilderoy Lockhart, who had won the Wizarding Weekly Most Charming Smile 5 times, destroyed trolls with magic, sailed with vampires, and was a recipient of the Order of Merlin's Third Order.
The Order of Merlin, isn't that the same as Ivan?
Harry was dazed by Lockhart's,
Great achievement.
but only the last sentence was understood.
Yes, I'm sure Ivan will be as accomplished as Mr. Lockhart.
Hermione exclaimed.
No, I'm not quite like Lockhart. I'm a second-class Merlin.
Yvonne said calmly, indicating that she was one rank above Lockhart. He did not want to be accused of being like Lockhart. Harry nearly laughed out loud when Hermione paused in her boasting of Lockhart, who had never been very fond of him, and became even more rebellious at her constant nagging. Hermione pursed her lips and stared at them. At that moment, the crowd began to disperse. Lockhart, who had finished his book signing, was making his way out of the room. Cameras flashed all around him. Every now and then, a middle-aged witch would be captured by his smile and scream in excitement. Lockhart was about to respond to these fanatical fans when he caught a glimpse of Ivan. As if he had found a treasure, he pushed his way through the reporters and the crowd blocking his way. Ivan frowned and tried to pull Harry away, but they were too late. Lockhart rushed forward and grabbed Harry's arm.
If it isn't Harry Potter.
There was another click of the shutter, and Harry was uncomfortable with the glare, and even more uncomfortable with Lockhart clutching his arm. Harry tried to break free, but Lockhart's arm was like a vice, locking him in place. Harry had to look at Hermione and Ivan for help.
And you, Ivan Hals, the genius who developed the Wolfsbane potion. What day is it that I'm meeting so many famous people?
Lockhart seemed very pleased and paid more attention to Ivan than to Harry. After all, this was a young wizard who had stolen his headline. When Lockhart woke up early that morning, he expected to find the headlines to be about his book signing, but when he looked through the Daily Prophet, he couldn't find anything. All the pages were filled with stories about Ivan Hals's genius. God only knows how heartbroken the man was. However, Lockhart was not a petty person, at least not in front of the media, so he kindly took pictures of the two of them and spoke to Ivan in a patronizing tone.
I've read today's reports. I'm surprised you're able to pull this off at your age.
Lockhart smiled and winked at Ivan, teasing him in a light tone.
I must say you've picked a good time. I was too busy settling goblin disputes last year to visit my werewolf friends and optimize my research. You have to understand that I came into contact with werewolves 3 years ago. You can read my book, Wander with Werewolves. I've been researching werewolves ever since, but you're one step ahead of me.
Lockhart's speed of speech was astonishing, especially when it came to his best-selling books. Ivan's mouth twitched, indicating that he had never met anyone so brazen. Lockhart, however, didn't seem to think anything of it. He went on to show off his status as a member of the Order of Merlin.
I read in the paper that you wanted the Order of Merlin. It's not an easy task, and I only got it in the book after sorting out untold troubles. Of course, with me, the recipient of the Order of Merlin, as your nominee, none of this would be a problem.
Chapter 160, I'm sorry, I'm afraid you won't be my nomin.
I don't think that's necessary, Mr. Lockhart. I'm afraid you're not going to be my nominee.
Ivan shook his head and refused without hesitation.
Why have you found someone?
Lockhart raised his eyebrows in surprise, but he did not give up.
Do you know, I'm a level 3 Order of Merlin, a well-known figure in the wizarding world. There are very few people in the Order of Merlin that I don't know.
As Lockhart was boasting about himself, Harry interrupted him.
Ivan's nominee is Professor Dumbledore, sir.
Lockhart's continuing speech came to a halt, as he would never claim to be more famous than Dumbledore. At that moment, Harry recalled Ivan's earlier words and took another stab at him.
And Ivan received a second-class Order of Merlin.
Lockhart's confident smile froze on his face. As a recipient of the Order of Merlin, he was not qualified to be nominated for the Order of Merlin. This is why Ivan was so adamant that Lockhart could not be named. Lockhart was embarrassed, but his thick skin allowed him to quickly adjust.
What a pity. I was going to say that I had a good talk with the head of the Order of Merlin the other day and wanted him to nominate you, but Dumbledore beat me to it. I'd really like to thank you for that.
Ivan said, speechless. He thought Lockhart was quite a talented fellow, being able to come back on his own and even befriending the head of the Order of Merlin.
You're welcome. It's my job to guide the younger generation.
Lockhart waved Ivan on the shoulder, taking his sarcastic words as a sign of gratitude. Perhaps because he had been repeatedly rebuffed in front of Ivan, Lockhart did not try to be clever with his words. After announcing in public that he would be the defense against the dark arts teacher at Hogwarts next year, Lockhart left in style to the applause of the crowd and the doubts of a few. This caused Ivan to lament the stupidity of these fanatical fans. Lockhart's words were full of loopholes, and anyone with half a brain could see that he was trying to ride on his popularity. However, these fans believed that Lockhart was trying to help his juniors out of kindness.
I think next year's defense against the dark arts class is going to suck.
Harry complained as Lockhart disappeared into the distance. Although he had only been in contact with Lockhart for less than 10 minutes, Lockhart was acting like a comical and absurd clown, constantly trying to impress him.
How could that be? Professor Lockhart is still very good. He was so good in the book. Maybe he was just a little impatient today.
Hermione defended Lockhart in a soft voice. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she was obviously upset when Lockhart pushed her away. Yvonne shook her head in exasperation, not knowing how to tell Hermione that Lockhart was a liar. After all, he didn't have any proof, and it would be better to wait for him to reveal himself next year. Not unlike Hermione, who seemed to think Lockhart was a good person, and Mrs. Weasley. She had been in a hurry to get Lockhart's autographed copy of the book, but was stopped by the crowd at the bookshop. When she came out, she talked about Lockhart's charm, which made Mr. Weasley jealous. Mr. Weasley handed a set of old books to Ginny and turned to Ivan.
Hales, did you have anything else to do after buying the books? If you have time, how about coming to the burrow? That's right, Ivan, come and play at our house,
Said George and Fred, looking excited. Ivan hesitated for a moment, then shook his head and said,
No, I'd rather stay and read.
as much as he wanted to visit the legendary burrow, he had already made plans for the future and did not want to change his mind at the last minute. Crucially, if he went to the burrow for a few days, he would be left alone.
Very well, then.
Arthur looked disappointed but did not press the matter. Mrs. Weasley took the opportunity to teach the boys a lesson.
Look, all of you, all you do is play all day. When do you ever want to come to the bookshop and read? Especially you, George, and you, Fred. If you had Ivan's learning spirit, I wouldn't object to you doing research around the house.
After being reprimanded, Ron, George, and Fred looked at Ivan with resentment, and Ivan said that he could not help them. When everyone had finished buying their textbooks for the next year, Ivan waved goodbye to them, and Hermione wanted to stay and read, but Mr. Granger had other things to attend to and did not feel comfortable leaving her alone.
That's strange. Why haven't I seen Malfoy and his father?
After seeing the Weasleys off, Ivan looked around for Malfoy and his family. He then realized that it was probably because of him that Malfoy Sr. did not go to Borgin and Burke's to discuss the sale of dark arts items, so he might have gone home after buying his books. It would be nice not to have Malfoy Sr. poking his nose in, thought Ivan, turning back to Flourish and Blots. After Lockhart's departure, the place became noticeably more deserted, with only a few parents and their children remaining. The owner of Flourish and Blots was a kindly middle-aged witch with round spectacles, who was flipping through a book. However, when Ivan got closer, he saw Lockhart's smiling face on the cover of the book. It was clear that she was a fan of Lockhart's, and Ivan was left speechless.
May I have the pleasure of reading here for a few days, madam?
Yvonne asked, considering the importance of magical knowledge.
If it's inconvenient, I can pay a certain reading fee. Do you want to read here? Of course, I mean you can read it if you want. There's no need to pay an extra fee. You're welcome here whenever you want.
The witch put down her book and looked at Ivan in surprise.
Thank you.
Chapter 161, The Story of the Muggle Princess and the Seven Fairies. Basic Spells Level 4, Collection of Ancient Runes, Curses and Countercurses.
Selfless.
Efforts were not without reward, as he was able to extract a great deal of information from Ivan. However, after receiving this information, Tom could not believe it and even wondered if he had misheard. You say the savior of the wizarding world who killed the Dark Lord 12 years ago was a newborn baby. How is that possible? Black ink marks covered most of the page in a short period of time, and the handwriting was messy. It was obvious that Tom could not contain his astonishment. He could not help but be surprised. Anyone who heard that he had been killed by a newborn baby after painstakingly cultivating to become a great existence in the wizarding world would find it ridiculous. Ivan would have been more comfortable if he had said that the Dark Lord had been defeated by Dumbledore or some powerful wizard. Ivan became more tolerant of Tom's questions, as he was planning to destroy the diary before he went to school, so he didn't really care whether he answered or not.
Madam, how much is this copy of Advanced Transfiguration?
3 galleons, 11 sickles.
The owner's wife said after a glance.
This is not a book you should be reading right now, child. It is good to love knowledge, but sometimes we must learn to take things one step at a time. Yes, a child your age should read a storybook, such as The Story of the Muggle Princess and the 7 Fairies, which was just brought in today and only sells 9 sickles. I've heard that it's the Muggle children's favorite.
Chapter 162. Is this what you show your child? Ivan looked at the book's cover, which showed 7 goblins and giants fighting over a Muggle princess. It is unknown which wizard plagiarized the story of Snow White and the 7 dwarfs and magically altered it into this. Are you sure this dark fairy tale and children's evil books are for children? However, the fact that it was sold here meant that the content of the book was not out of line. There should not be anything strange about it.
I don't think I'll need one, sir.
Ivan refused without hesitation, although he knew in his heart that it was an unhelpful suggestion. In fact, this was not the first time the landlady had reminded him of this, as she had tried to persuade him to read some basic books while he was reading. Ivan was frustrated by this, and after a moment's thought, he pulled out his wand and tapped it against the book. To the surprise of the couple, the book, wrapped in magic, slowly transformed into a toad, which lolled there with its cheeks bulging and an unpleasant gurgling sound coming from its stomach.
This is 3 galleons and 11 sickles. If there's nothing else, I'll take my lave.
Ivan said politely as he placed the money on the table. Behind him, the manager and his wife surrounded the toad with strange looks on their faces as they realized that they could not change the book back. They would have to wait for the book's magic to wear off, and then lock it in a cage to prevent it from escaping. Back at the house, Ivan considered his options and decided it was time to deal with the Horcrux problem. He needed a spell called Fire to destroy the Horcrux. After hiding Tom Riddle's diary in his room, Ivan went to the kitchen to find Alicia, who was busy cooking dinner.
Mother, can you show me how to release a fierce fire?
Asia stopped controlling the kitchen, and the kitchenware began to fall out of the air, but she didn't care.
Li Huo, why are you learning this? I've heard that fierce fire is a very powerful magic, and the last time I saw you use it, you burned all the dummies in the practice room.
Ivan pretended to be extremely interested and tried to convince her that he wanted to learn this magic. This was how Ivan learned about the thunderbolt explosion.
That's different.
Alicia shook her head.
If the flames are not controlled properly, there is a danger that they will backfire on the caster, causing great destruction. Most importantly, there are very few spells that can stop the spread of the flames, and I have not mastered them.
Ivan's heart turned cold as he recalled the destroyed room of requirement in the book, in which Crabbe was unable to control his magic after releasing the fire of malice. In Ivan's mind, the only thing that could suppress such a terrifying flame was a high-level spell, the ultimate charm. Ivan didn't think he had any control over the fire, but to his dismay, no matter how much he tried to persuade Alicia, she refused to teach him the spell. This, coupled with the fact that Ivan had no intention of talking about the Horcrux diary, made it even more unlikely that he would be able to reason with Alicia. As a result, Ivan continued to frown as they ate, thinking about how to destroy the Horcrux. Do I have to teach myself in the restricted section of Hogwarts? After dinner, Ivan was about to go upstairs to his room when he was stopped by Alicia, who threw a ring-like object at him. Flustered, Ivan took it and looked at her doubtfully. Alicia put one hand on her hip and pointed a soup ladle at Ivan with the other.
This is a ring that can release the firestorming curse and can be used twice. Although the range of the firestorm released is a little small, it is not easy to lose control. Be careful when you use it, don't burn yourself. Now can you tell me what you're planning to do with sharp fire?
Alicia asked.
I'll tell you when I can.
Ivan replied casually, putting the ring away. Ivan slipped into his room as fast as he could before Alicia lost her temper. Outside the door, I heard a faint roar of anger from Alicia. Ivan didn't have time to pay attention to this, so he quickly pulled up the system's magical inventory. Magical item, Ring of Fire. Magic higher. Effect summon fire 2 out of 3.
Has it been used once already?
I don't think I'll need one, sir. Ivan refused without hesitation, although he knew in his heart that it was an unhelpful suggestion. In fact, this was not the first time the landlady had reminded him of this, as she had tried to persuade him to read some basic books while he was reading. Ivan was frustrated by this, and after a moment's thought, he pulled out his wand and tapped it against the book. To the surprise of the couple, the book, wrapped in magic, slowly transformed into a toad, which lolled there with its cheeks bulging and an unpleasant gurgling sound coming from its stomach.
Does it contain more than magical power?
Chapter 163, Possibility of Merging Multiple Bloodlines. Ivan is reminded of the protective spell Lily Potter placed on Harry. In the old headmaster's words, it was the power of love. Ivan's current knowledge of magic was not sufficient to understand how this power worked, and the only spell he came into contact with was the Summoning Guard, which turned emotions into power. However, Ivan was able to confirm that the pendant had not been made in the last year or two, as evidenced by the slight wear on the metal. Ivan's alchemical knowledge told him that the crescent was made over a decade ago. Putting the precious locket away, Ivan retrieved the Horcrux diary from the depths of his wardrobe and sneaked out of the house without Alicia's knowledge. It was close to midnight and Knockturn Alley was eerily quiet. Everything was gray and the only light came from the moon. Ivan adjusted himself, intending to destroy Voldemort's Horcruxes. Perhaps sensing that something was amiss, the Horcrux diary began to turn automatically, and lines of ink began to appear. "What is it? Why did you bring me here, Hales?" Ivan smiled and wrote in his diary with a quill. "Practice some magic, of course. It's not very convenient at home." Ivan was not in the habit of being a commentator before his enemy's death. Letting his enemy die, an unexplained death, was more like it. Tom Riddle in the diary fell silent for a moment. Ivan's words were not particularly glib, but there was something wrong with them. Especially since it was getting late. Was it really necessary to come out and practice magic now? The writing on the diary was disjointed, and the black ink on the white paper reappeared. "Is that so? Then I'll stay here with you." The Horcrux diary was left open and unclosed, the pages turning on their own from time to time. Ivan ignored it, sitting on a weedy rock and setting aside the Horcrux diary to activate the Ring of Fire. At that moment, he was interrupted by a system prompt. "Ding, system update complete, please check." Accompanying the notification was a large amount of updated information. After sorting through the information that had just popped into her head, Ivan paused in the act of destroying the Horcrux. This was because, in addition to the update, the system issued another blood fusion-related mission, which happened to be related to Tom Riddle. Mission Blood Mystery. Objective: find a way to fuse multiple bloodlines. Current task progress, 5%. Task reward, legendary points *1. Task description: after experiencing the great increase in strength of the fusion ritual, you will not be satisfied with the current situation and will continue to search for more relevant information. Note, while merging multiple bloodlines means more risk, this is not an unsolvable problem.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to practice magic all night.
Chapter 168. 168 Thank you so much, Seamus, won 3 years ago. Chapter 164 Thank you so much, Seamus.
Which means I have about 60% of the magic of an adult wizard.
Ivan muttered. This was because his magic had doubled in the process of fusing with the unicorn's blood. Otherwise, he would only have 30% of the magic of an adult wizard. It was normal compared to his status as a second-year wizard. Ivan then turned his attention to the latest update, which focused on the new legendary points. After reading the instructions, Ivan figured out that this thing had only one purpose. 5 legendary points are required to activate the system's protective mode once, which can be used to remove the risk of merging. This came as a slight relief to Ivan, as he would not have dared to use it if he did not have it, even if he had the means to fuse multiple bloodlines. After all, the risk of merging one bloodline was already high enough, let alone multiple bloodlines mixed together. Ivan was mildly surprised when he started out with 3 points. After searching through the system, Ivan found the extra legendary title bar which showed 3 titles: Troll Killer, Novice Savior, and Dragoon. Ivan opened one with a strange expression on his face. Legendary title, Dragoon Dragon Whelp. Legend level. The Legend of Mir 2, the story of you repelling invaders on a young dragon spread throughout the school at the end of term, and although this claim was rejected by the Ministry of Magic, Mr. Seamus Finnegan insisted on telling everyone he met about your exploits.
Thank you so much, Seamus.
Ivan complained. Ivan had not expected Seamus to try and prove to everyone that he could fly on a dragon. As for the other 2 incidents, Ivan had a rough idea of what they represented even without looking at them: the legend of how they contributed to the slaying of a troll on Halloween, and the fact that they were obtained by stopping the return of the Dark Lord during the quest for the Philosopher's Stone. It was one thing to have a nickname that was worse than the other, but what about the Novice Savior? The only better dragoons always made him think of something strange.
What is it?
Alicia asked worriedly. Yvonne shook her head and said,
It's nothing, I'm not used to the idea of school starting so soon.
Alicia scolded jokingly and was about to hit Ivan over the head with her fork, but he dodged it. After breakfast, Ivan went upstairs to pack his bags. At first, he wanted to help, but he refused. He could not reveal the existence of the Horcrux diary, or it would be burned by him, and his hard-won lead would be cut off. In the afternoon, Ivan found time to practice his blood magic in the basement. Having been able to clearly see his own magical scale, Ivan wanted to check the limits of his ability to cast spells, so it didn't take long for a silvery white unicorn to appear in the basement, stomping through the white smoke in pursuit of a terrifying-looking Dementor. Given that he would not have another chance to practice his blood magic with a Dementor after school tomorrow, Ivan tortured the Dementor for an entire afternoon, and only when the Dementor's body became so incorporeal that it looked like it was about to collapse did he let it go. With her magic nearly exhausted, Ivan figured out how much the unicorn's shadow consumed. In the incorporeal state, 1 unit of magic would only be consumed in 5 minutes, but in the corporeal state, the consumption was extremely terrifying. In other words, he could maintain his unicorn's shadow for up to 6 seconds without expending his magic. It required a large amount of magic power to be dispersed and then reformed, depending on the degree of destruction.
You.
After confirming the limits of his spellcasting, Ivan canceled his bloodline magic and opened the chest. He didn't even have to chase it away. The Dementor moved so quickly that with a whoosh. Chapter 165, Look, Aren't They Here Now? In Knockturn Alley, outside the dark arts shop, Ivan, who was carrying his luggage, waited for a long time at the door. When he did not see Alicia come out, he shouted,
Mom.
Just as Ivan was wondering if he should go first, Alicia arrived late, having changed her clothes. After closing the shop with a wave of her wand, Alicia pinched Ivan's cheek.
What's the hurry? Wouldn't it be better if we didn't take that night bus?
So how do we get there? While Ivan was lost in his thoughts, he was grabbed by the arm by Alicia, and then there was a spatial shift. When Ivan recovered, he found himself on the corner of the street not far from King's Cross Station.
Look, there's plenty of time now, isn't there?
Said Alicia, ruffling Ivan's hair.
It's too dangerous. What if the Muggles find out?
Ivan asked, exasperated. Adult wizards were not subject to the same restrictions as young wizards, but they would be punished by the Ministry of Magic if they were seen by a large number of Muggles and their existence was exposed. It was for this reason that he was only able to teleport to a nearby back alley when Dugat took him to the Ministry of Magic.
Well, nobody noticed, did they?
Said Alicia nonchalantly, but then she frowned and looked sharply behind her. At the corner of the street, a middle-aged man in a suit and leather shoes was chewing on a piece of bread. He was standing there in a daze. It was obvious that he had seen the two of them appear out of thin air. When he saw Isaiah and Ivan looking at him, the middle-aged man looked horrified. He dropped the bread in his mouth, let out a piercing scream, and ran away. But before he could move, a magical light appeared.
I forgot everything.
The middle-aged man fell to the ground at Alicia's command.
Done, let's go.
Alicia put her wand away and headed for King's Cross Station before the screams attracted more muggles. Yvonne turned to see that the unfortunate muggle was back on his feet, looking dazed, perhaps having forgotten why he was there. Yvonne observed a moment of silence for him, hoping he would not be late today. When they arrived at the bus stop, Alicia gave them a lot of advice, telling them to be careful and eat regularly at school and to always send letters back.
Okay, I got it.
Ivan interrupted, his ears starting to get calluses. Ivan hesitated, then continued.
By the way, Mom, the werewolf wizards in the East Side ruins promised to help me gather information about the Knockoff Alley. If you have any trouble, you can ask them for help.
Ivan hadn't kept his contact with the werewolves from Alicia, having already told her most of it. After all, Doggett knew about it. In order to prevent this fellow from using his name to fool the werewolves into causing trouble in Knockoff Alley, Ivan had to involve Ethia to keep her in check. Before leaving, Ivan specifically advised Fran and Walker that they should either write to him or contact Alicia.
Sure, I'll keep an eye on them for you.
Alicia smiled and nodded. Ivan then left Alicia dragging his suitcase and rushed onto platform 9 3/4. After Ivan left, Alicia sighed, finding herself increasingly unable to read her children's minds. As she hesitated, she recalled what Duggett had said to her the other day and was initially reluctant to believe it, even suspecting that he was imagining things. However, Ivan's interest in the group of werewolf wizards caused Alicia to hesitate.
Forget it, let's find out who these werewolves are first, if they're really as innocent as the introduction says.
Alicia muttered to herself. Ivan passed through the station and turned to look at the tunnel behind him. He wondered if Dobby would seal off the passageway and keep Harry and Ron out if he took the Horcrux diary. With that in mind, Ivan placed the luggage on top of the train's trunk, then boarded the train and sat down in a relatively empty compartment. Wine.
Ivan, why are you here alone? Where are Harry and Ron?
Hermione asked curiously as she hurried in and took the seat opposite him.
I don't know, maybe she hasn't got on yet.
Yvonne said, keeping the diary low so Hermione wouldn't see it.
What?
Hermione was shocked, then panicked. How were Harry and Ron going to get to school if they missed the train?
Don't worry, I'm sure they'll find a way.
Ivan said reassuringly, then pointed out of the window as if he had seen something.
Look, aren't they here now?
Chapter 166. The Man Who Flies in the Sky is the Great Savior, Harry Potter. As the car drew closer, Hermione could see a look of terror on Ron's face as well as Harry's. Apparently, driving a magical car was not an easy task for either of them.
Harry, Ron's.
Hermione shouted at them, opening the window in shock. Harry and Ron, who were sitting in the magic car, heard Hermione's voice and looked over. But before they could say hello, the magical car with its own ideas whizzed back into the clouds, leaving Harry and Ron's terrified cries ringing in their ears.
Ivan, we have to find a way to save them.
Hermione said worriedly, then frowned in thought and continued.
Maybe we can get Harry and Ron to bring the car down to match the speed of the train, then try to get them over.
It's too much of a risk, they can't control the car.
Ivan shook his head, indicating that there was nothing he could do about the children's death-seeking behavior. It was not a big deal to miss the train, as Harry and Ron only needed to go home or back to the leaky cauldron for help. Even with Dobby causing trouble and making it difficult to send a letter, there was always a way to contact Dumbledore. There was no need to fly over in a car. It's a total death wish.
Can this carriage really move? How do we get it to move?
Hermione asked as she sat in one of the carriages, curiously touching the sides of the carriage. The railings were cold, but the carriage beneath her was motionless, causing her to panic.
It'll move when it's full.
Ivan replied, but he was looking at the front of the carriage with a strange expression. This was because Ivan realized that he could not see the Strauss, even though he had died once and killed Quirrell. Now that he thought about it, however, Ivan seemed to recall that Harry of old was like him. Even though Harry witnessed his parents' deaths at birth and destroyed the Chino in his first year, he could not see it until after Cedric's death. Apparently, the Strals are not easy to come by.
Ivan, what are you looking at? Is there something there? This drow.
Yvonne, deep in thought, replied instinctively, then resumed when she saw Hermione's surprise.
I heard it from my seniors. They said that the school carriages were pulled by a creature called the Strals.
Hermione stared in the direction Ivan indicated but saw nothing. Just as Hermione was about to ask a question, someone spoke first.
You say there's something pulling the carriage, but I heard that the carriages here can't move on their own, and what is the Strals?
Yvonne turned her head to the side and saw two young Gryffindor girls, both in their second year. One of the girls was dark and did not look European.
Parvati Lavender.
Hermione exclaimed. Yvonne was shocked when she heard the names, then remembered they were Hermione's roommates.
Hermione, can we come up? I don't know anyone in the carriage nearby.
Began Lavender Brown. Parvati Patil added.
We're not interrupting anything, are we?
With that, they both burst out laughing, their laughter ringing in the air like silver bells.
What are you two talking about?
Chapter 167, It Won't Take Too Much Time.
Come on up.
Yvonne spoke to Parvati and Lavender, thinking how precocious young wizards were these days, thinking about forming a couple when they were only 12 or 13. After the two of them climbed up and sat down, the carriage, which had been stagnant for a long time, finally started moving slowly. It seemed that they had reached the standard to start the carriage.
You mean only those who have seen death can see it? Then how do we know that the Strals you speak of exist?
Parvati wondered. Hermione could not see the Strals either, but she was not suspicious of Ivan's claims, other than the fact that she had not read enough books to have seen the creature's description.
The Strals can't see it, but they should be able to touch it.
Ivan said after a moment. The bold Lavender suddenly stood up and leaned out of the carriage towards the front reins, and her palm soon found a long, whip-like object, presumably a tail.
My God, there really is a the Strals.
Exclaimed Lavender. Parvati was also curious and copied Lavender in reaching out to touch it. Seeing the bold actions of the two young witches, Ivan quickly intervened.
The Strals are dangerous creatures. Don't touch them now. They can fly. What if you anger them and they take the carriage and throw us into the air?
Parvati quickly withdrew her hand, but there was still a hint of a smile on her lips, and it was clear that she had felt it.
Is it that dangerous? Do they bite?
Lavender asked. Ivan nodded without hesitation and explained how the Strals were attracted to raw meat and blood. He also described how the Strals looked and described them as terrifying. Although Ivan knew that the school's the Strals were domesticated, docile, and generally non-aggressive. However, Parvati and Lavender couldn't see the Strals at all, and they were only children, so what if they got addicted and touched the Strals somewhere they shouldn't? The Strals, however docile, were, in essence, classified as dangerous by the Ministry of Magic, and while it was fine to simply confirm their existence, it was best not to lose your guard. After Ivan's threats, Parvati and Lavender gave up on the idea of touching the Strals. Ivan, however, did not see Hermione sitting next to him and wanted to touch the Strals as well, but she quietly withdrew her hand and looked at him resentfully. The carriage moved smoothly along the path, following the long line of carriages, the four of them sitting in the carriage and chatting, Ivan listening to the gossip of the others, Hermione worried about the safety of Harry and Ron, so she casually agreed. Half an hour later, the carriage slowed to a halt beside the stone steps leading to the oak doors. It was night by the time they arrived at the castle. There was no moon in the sky, and the light from the stars was dim. They had no choice but to follow the street lamps and the crowd.
Ivan, what is it?
Hermione had only taken a few steps when she realized that Ivan was not following her and was still standing by the car, stroking something. This reminded Hermione of the Strals that Ivan had mentioned.
Hermione, didn't you want to confirm the existence of the Strals?
But you said the Strals were dangerous, magical creatures that were best left alone.
Hermione asked hesitantly, somewhat tempted.
That's generally true, but the Thestrals here are very well bred, and there's no danger if we're careful. I lied to them just now.
Ivan explained. Ivan also looked at Parvati and Lavender in the distance. When the two young Gryffindor witches indicated that Yvonne and Hermione were not following them, Parvati tried to turn around and ask what was going on, but Lavender tactfully dragged her away.
It'll only take a few seconds. It won't take too much time.
Ivan went on, estimating that Harry and Ron were now battling the Whomping Willow. After all, the magical car was quite fast, arriving almost at the same time as the train. It must have landed while they were in the carriage. It would be too late for them to inform the professors.
Well, that's enough touching. Let's go.
Why it's been so long, Harry and Ron are still in the car.
Chapter 168, Why Didn't We Ever Think of Driving a Car? Ivan and Hermione ran back to the castle and met Professor McGonagall, who was welcoming the new students.
What, you're saying that Potter and Mr. Weasley are flying to school in a Muggle car?
Professor McGonagall was so shocked that she thought Hermione was joking. As far as she knew, Muggle cars could not fly. However, seeing the genuine concern on Hermione's face, Professor McGonagall immediately understood the gravity of the situation.
I think Harry may have been in so much trouble that he missed the train and drove over in a Muggle car.
Ivan added,
That won't do either. If they missed the train, they could have sent a letter for us to pick them up. How could they do such a dangerous thing?
Professor McGonagall scolded angrily, her lips trembling. What if Harry and Ron's Muggle car went wrong or crashed? Professor McGonagall spoke urgently.
I'm going to go to your headmaster, Albus, and ask him if he has any ideas. As for the rest of you, get in the hall and don't go anywhere.
Professor McGonagall warned them as she hurried away. Hermione made a vague attempt to follow him, but Ivan stopped her. They were in no condition to help. As they entered the Great Hall, Ivan pulled Hermione to a seat and looked at the teacher's table. Snape and Professor McGonagall's seats were empty, and Lockhart's seat, which had previously been taken by Professor McGonagall, was empty. There was also no sign of Dumbledore. As the time approached, the Sorting Hat kept asking when it would start, and it could not resist singing its new lyrics. The new students became more and more nervous. Several professors at the teachers' table discussed who would preside over the new students' sorting.
Listen to me, all of you. I'm afraid there's no one in the wizarding world who knows the sorting better than I do.
Lockhart stood up and declared confidently. As the professors stared at him in confusion, Lockhart tried to sell himself for the opportunity to be sorted into the new school, and repeatedly stressed that he had presided over similar sorting sessions at Muggle schools. Even Beauxbatons and Durmstrang, two of Europe's largest magic schools, invited him to the welcoming ceremony. Unfortunately, the other professors clearly did not trust him, and Professor Flitwick, the most prestigious of them all, jumped out of his chair, left his seat, and walked towards the stage. The Sorting Hat was finally able to sing, and although it didn't have a great voice, it sounded surprisingly good to the beat. Then, the new students walked to the front desk one by one and sat on the small chairs to begin the sorting. Professor Flitwick soon discovered that he was not cut out for the job, and as a goblin, he was able to hold his sorting hat so that he could not reach the top of the students' heads on his toes. Just as Flitwick was about to lower the students' chairs with a charm, Lockhart, being clever, moved a stool over and encouraged Professor Flitwick not to be self-conscious about being small, as standing on a stool could make you very tall. His actions embarrassed Professor Flitwick, but Lockhart, oblivious to this, kindly patted Flitwick on the shoulder, telling him not to thank him.
It's Harry.
The young witch was looking at the door to the hall. Yvonne turned to see Harry, and Ron trying to sneak through the door. The boys might have assumed that no one would notice them while they were being sorted, but they forgot to look behind them. Snape had been waiting for them.
Harry and Ron aren't going to be fired for this, are they?
Hermione asked worriedly as Snape led them away.
Don't worry, they won't.
Ivan assured her. Dumbledore would never fire anyone, even if they were driving a magic car and crashing into a Whomping Willow. Time passed slowly, and Dumbledore arrived at the end of the sorting ceremony, looking as calm as if nothing had happened. He gave a concise speech, arranged dinner for everyone with his wand, and left. Ivan speculated that Dumbledore might have gone to clean up after Harry and Ron, as they were seen driving a flying car to school. The Ministry of Magic presumably had to dispatch a large force to erase the Muggles' memories. After all the trouble they've caused, the Ministry would have come after them if Dumbledore hadn't been there to protect them.
This is so cool. Why didn't we think of driving that car to school?
Chapter 169, Letter from the Merlin Knights. The next day, Ivan arrived at the Great Hall early to enjoy his first breakfast of the school year. Harry and Ron looked distracted, as if something bad was about to happen, and only responded when Neville called out to them. Hermione, on the other hand, was furious at their escapade the previous day and did not look pleased. Shortly after, there was a loud whirring noise outside the Great Hall, and Ivan looked up to see a large flock of owls streaming in from outside the castle, heading for their respective targets and delivering letters and objects to the long tables of the four houses. Nearly half of the owls flew at Ivan, and several of them collided in mid-flight, spilling envelopes across the sky. Ivan frowned and tapped it with his wand. The envelopes that had fallen to the ground flew over and floated in front of him. This anomaly quickly attracted the attention of a group of lesser wizards.
Wow, so many letters, who sent them to you?
Hermione asked curiously.
It's probably an order for Wolfsbane, isn't it?
Yvonne said casually, then added.
It's odd that I told them to send it to the shop.
Wow, so many letters, who sent them to you? Hermione asked curiously. It's probably an order for Wolfsbane, isn't it? Yvonne said casually, then added, It's odd that I told them to send it to the shop. Picking up one of the envelopes, Ivan hesitated, as he realized that it was different from the others. It was white with gold trim and had a strange circular design in the center. Its celebrity was Richard Goshawk, a name never heard of. Ephraim's interest piqued. She opened the envelope and examined the contents. Honored Mr. Harles, due to your invention of the wolf venom potion, which improved the survival of werewolves and contributed greatly to the wizarding community, we are pleased to inform you that you have been inducted into the Order of Merlin, and will soon be the youngest recipient of the Order of Merlin, second class, in 1,000 years. At the suggestion of your nominee, Sir Albus Dumbledore, we will send a specialist to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry to award you the Order of Merlin, Class 2. Captain Richard Goshawk, Grand Master of the Order of Merlin, Vice President of the International Confederation of Wizards, recipient of the Order of Merlin, Class I. For the love of God.
It seems to be a letter from the Order of Merlin.
Ivan said with a shrug, handing the envelope to a curious Hermione. Hermione checked the contents of the envelope and exclaimed happily.
Congratulations, Ivan.
Yvonne nodded, her mind elsewhere. He estimated that he would receive legendary points for this award. After all, winning the Order of Merlin had a much greater impact than the small-scale fights he had had in school during his first year. However, the awarding of the medal was delayed until around Halloween and was held at Hogwarts. In Ivan's opinion, however, the Order of Merlin was rather scrupulous. He even planned to spend several months tracking the effects of the Wolfsbane potion and getting a report on the status of the werewolf wizard in order to evaluate his contribution to the wizarding community. As for the rest of the envelopes, they were filled with ordinary contents which Yvonne skimmed through. Most were letters from fans, most of them werewolves. The remaining letters were presumably from wizards who disliked or opposed werewolves. This was because it was full of threats and insults, and stated that werewolves were extremely evil beings, and that the only way to solve this problem was to destroy all werewolves. Ivan could not be bothered with the retards and crumpled up the letters to throw them in the bin. Harry and Ron joined them to see a letter from the Master of the Order of Merlin. Before Harry could say anything, however, he saw a newspaper on the table, along with a pile of envelopes. The front page showed a magical car driving through the city, with two figures in it.
Jesus, Ron, we reported it.
Harry exclaimed. He didn't need to be reminded that Ron's eyes were fixed on the newspaper with fear in them, and he suddenly felt that the trouble might be bigger than they thought. Overhead, a trembling owl approached with a red letter dangling from its beak. It flapped its wings weakly and flew so slowly that one wondered if it would suddenly topple over. Luckily, the gray-black owl managed to complete its task and deliver the contents to Ron, even though it crashed into Hermione's jug of milk.
What is it?
Hermione asked curiously.
That's a howler, and I advise you to be like me.
Ivan warned her, turning to look at her. The young witch didn't know what was going on, but she copied Ivan and covered her ears, and the Gryffindors who knew what was happening ran away. Harry swallowed hard and stared at Ron in horror. He had seen the power of the howler during his first term, and it was loud enough to wake the entire Gryffindor lounge. Ron's expression was equally sour, and he looked on the verge of tears.
Ron, how dare you do this without telling us? How dare you drive that magic car to school without permission? I wouldn't be surprised if they fired you for it. See how I deal with you. You probably never even considered how your father and I felt when we found out the car was gone.
Chapter 170. You must think it's easy to make the headlines, right, Harry? When the roaring in the hall had died down, Ivan released his hands from his ears. There was a brief silence, broken only by the awkward stares of Harry and Ron. At that moment, from the Slytherin house table came a derisive voice.
Potter, it looks like you've done something spectacular again.
Malfoy said as he, Goyle, and Clark approached them. Malfoy gave Harry a sardonic look and then looked at Ron.
I'm guessing your father hates your guts, Weasley. He'll probably be forced to lose his job and leave the ministry in disgrace.
With that, Malfoy burst out laughing, and Goyle and Clark followed suit.
An incisor.
Alarmed, Malfoy frantically tried to draw his wand and retaliate. However, to his surprise, nothing happened as Ron cast the spell. There was only a faint black mist coming out of Ron's wand.
What are you doing, Weasley? Showing us some sort of magical trick?
Malfoy jeered. Ron was so angry that he wanted to drop his wand, which had not been normal since it was broken by the Whomping Willow last night.
Friendly.
Interaction, since they weren't going to fight, he waved his wand and began to clean up the mess on the table. He also kept the letter and planned to reply to it with an automatic quill when he returned to the dormitory. To Ivan's surprise, however, Malfoy either got bolder or mocked Ron for successfully inflating his confidence.
Hells.
Malfoy shouted, stepping forward to pick up the Daily Prophet and flip through it.
I didn't know you lived in a dump like Knockturn Alley until I read the paper.
Ivan's brow furrowed and he started to speak, but Hermione beat him to it.
Shut up, Malfoy, there's nothing to be ashamed of living in Knockturn Alley. Ivan got the Order of Merlin, the highest honor in the wizarding world, all by himself. Can you do it?
So what? I heard from my dad that wizards live in Knockturn Alley like rats in a sewer.
Malfoy ranted. Remembering how his father used to lecture him about it, Malfoy was annoyed and was about to continue when Ivan interrupted him.
Do you only rely on your father, Malfoy?
Ivan asked, looking at him mildly as he tapped his wand in his right hand.
I thought you'd be a little more independent in your second year, rather than just childishly listening to your father.
Malfoy flew into a rage and tried to defend himself, but Ivan did not give him the chance.
Besides, you were nowhere to be found when I was chatting happily with your father a few days ago. He told me that if your grades don't improve this year, you won't be able to do well in this lifetime.
Ivan's nonsense, combined with Malfoy the Elder's comments about his son in Borgin and Burke's, fooled Draco Malfoy. Malfoy didn't want to believe Ivan's words, particularly that Ivan could talk and laugh with his father, but when they were at home, Malfoy reprimanded him for it.
You don't believe me, or you haven't heard your father talk about it. Then go home and ask your father.
Ivan scolded Malfoy, who was beginning to waver.
Ivan, you know Malfoy's father.
In the morning, as they walked along the corridor to the herbology classroom, Hermione asked Harry and Ron about what had happened. They did not expect Ivan to be connected to old Malfoy.
No, actually we don't know each other that well, we've only met once.
Yvonne explained, seeing where Hermione was going with this.
And you just said that.
Hermione's eyes widened.
What's the big deal? You guys were having fun with Minister Fudge in your first year of school.
Ivan said nonchalantly. Harry and Ron were left speechless, and Hermione rolled her eyes. If they remembered correctly, they had only met Fudge briefly and exchanged a few words, and this was considered a joke. Having answered their questions, Ivan hurried into the greenhouse. A short time later, Professor Sprout came in from the outer lawn with a bandage on her arm. She did not look happy. This was not only because Lockhart followed her around trying to instill nonsense about herbs in her. During the treatment of the willow, Lockhart cast a so-called healing spell that caused the willow to go berserk. In an attempt to calm the willow, she was hit in the arm. Lockhart, however, had no such self-consciousness. He was full of confidence, as proud as a peacock with its tail spread out. He walked up to Professor Sprout and even stood in front of her, shouting at the crowd.
Hello there, I was just showing Professor Sprout how to treat a whooping willow, but I don't want you to think I'm better at herbology than she is. I just happened to come across a couple of these exotic plants on my travels.
Lockhart might have wanted to say more, but Professor Sprout interrupted him without hesitation, shouting for all the students to go to the third greenhouse and begin the lesson. Yvonne hurried with the crowd to the classroom. Harry tried to follow, but Lockhart stopped him.
Professor Sprout, would it be all right if I spoke to Harry alone, just for 2 minutes? You don't mind, do you?
Lockhart turned to Professor Sprout. Professor Sprout seemed to mind, but Lockhart took Harry by the arm and pulled him aside, speaking earnestly.
You must think it's easy to make the headlines, don't you, Harry? What are you talking about, Professor? I don't quite understand.
Chapter 171, Who's in Class? Ivan could hear the conversation as he entered the third greenhouse, and he understood Lockhart's frustration better than Harry's confusion. Lockhart's appointment as Professor of Defense Against the Dark Arts at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry was expected to make headlines, but it was cruelly crushed by the news of Harry and Ron driving in public. This was a major blow to Lockhart, who was almost morbidly famous.
Now, who can tell me what the properties of mandrake are?
Professor Sprout, who was holding some earmuffs, asked loudly as he stood in front of some potted plants. Even though Ivan was distracted by his thoughts, answering questions had long since become second nature to him, so when Professor Sprout finished speaking, Ivan managed to speak before Hermione could.
Professor Sprout, the so-called mandrake grass, also known as mandrake grass, is a powerful restorative that can restore a transformed or bewitched person to their normal state, and is an important part of most antidotes.
Now, who can tell me what the properties of mandrake are? Professor Sprout, who was holding some earmuffs, asked loudly as he stood in front of some potted plants. Even though Ivan was distracted by his thoughts, answering questions had long since become second nature to him, so when Professor Sprout finished speaking, Ivan managed to speak before Hermione could. Professor Sprout, the so-called mandrake grass, also known as mandrake grass, is a powerful restorative that can restore a transformed or bewitched person to their normal state, and is an important part of most antidotes.
What am I supposed to do when you've done everything?
Who the hell is taking this class? Ivan was in a good mood when he finally got his GPA. The only regret was that Professor Sprout only gave him a 5-point bonus in class, even though he explained all of the mandrake's properties and even changed the pots of several mandrakes.
What a wonderful transfiguration, 10 points to Gryffindor.
Professor McGonagall stepped forward and held Ivan's transfigured button aloft for all to see. Hermione, who was standing nearby, looked at the button in McGonagall's hand and then at the beetle at her table that had just changed its form. She pouted in disappointment. The gap between her and Ivan seemed to have widened again.
Professor McGonagall, do you remember the promise we made last year to study for the Animagus? Well,
Professor McGonagall stopped what she was doing and looked Ivan up and down for a while with a mixture of admiration and resignation.
of course I haven't forgotten, Hales.
But it's going to take a while to learn an animagus.
McGonagall said.
Why don't we take this week off? Of course.
Ivan said, nodding to show he had no objections. He was well aware that professors at Hogwarts took on a lot of homework and had to teach for 7 years at a time, and it was kind of Professor McGonagall to take time off to give him special lessons. With that in mind, Yvonne thanked him profusely. No teacher would dislike a student who was polite and talented, and Professor McGonagall was no different. A smile tugged at her pursed lips, but she still spoke up.
In the meantime, I hope you will reconsider learning Animagus. I'm sure you understand how dangerous this spell is.
I won't give up, Professor.
Chapter 172. You must not know how this professor position was vacated. With Professor McGonagall's promise, Ivan went to the Great Hall in good spirits. The Great Hall was already packed when he arrived, but Hermione, Harry and Ron saved him a seat.
Ivan, why are you so late?
Hermione, who was wrestling with a stake, turned to him and asked.
Just asking Professor McGonagall a few questions.
Ivan said, smiling. The Animagus transfiguration was a secret, and although he trusted Hermione, the fewer people who knew about it, the safer it was.
No wonder you're so good at transfiguration.
Hermione exclaimed in annoyance. The little witch more or less understood the gap between her and Ivan. She must have not worked hard enough and not actively consulted the professors. Thinking back to Ivan's school years, when he would often try to learn transfiguration while eating, Hermione would practice with her latest cup, occasionally asking him about the art of transfiguration. Harry and Ron, the two underachievers, were unable to get a word in edgewise, and were left to complain to each other about recent misfortunes. Ron, in particular, complained about his wand, and Harry reluctantly asked him to write home and ask for another one, but Ron refused, not wanting to be scolded again. Ivan suddenly thought of something and asked,
Ron, can I see your broken wand?
The method of wand making had always been something Ivan was curious about. However, he did not have any extra wands to study and did not particularly want to break them open, so Ron's broken wand intrigued him.
Of course, Ivan, can you fix it?
Ron immediately handed over his wand and looked at Ivan expectantly. Ivan took the wand from him and examined it closely. It was badly damaged, broken in half, with only a few wooden fibers holding it together. Ron had also magically gummed the outer part of the wand to prevent it from falling off. After opening the system column, the information was clearly displayed. Magical items: wand, amberwood, unicorn hair. Magic, low, middle. Special state, fracture. Description: this is a badly damaged wand, and although the core of the wand is not damaged, there is a certain chance that the wand will backfire on you when used to cast spells.
Maybe it can be fixed, but I can't guarantee it.
Ivan said, looking a little more confident after reading the instructions.
Do what you want, then. It's bad enough as it is.
Ron said nonchalantly, angry at the sight of the wand. Ivan nodded and put his wand away for the moment. Hermione suddenly remembered something.
Ron, you gave Ivan your wand. What about the next defense against the dark arts class?
Trust me, you won't have to use a wand in the upcoming defense against the dark arts class.
Ivan said.
Why?
Hermione asked expectantly, holding up a brand new class schedule with Lockhart's classes circled in the shape of a heart.
I'm sure Professor Lockhart will want us to learn some new charms.
Ivan looked at her strangely, thinking that she must have been heartbroken by Lockhart's heartless behavior at Diagon Alley. However, Hermione will surely be impressed with this defense against the dark arts lesson.
Even if you teach us a new spell next class, I can't get it out of my broken wand.
Ron was quite open-minded and would only make a fool of himself anyway. Harry had a vague feeling that Lockhart's teaching was absolutely terrible, as he did not seem like a decent professor. The truth was worse than they thought, or perhaps they had trouble getting to class. A very thin, gray-haired boy in his first year was standing in the middle of the road with a Muggle camera in his hand. When he saw Harry, he blushed and rushed to meet him.
Hello, Harry, my.
Photo taking, Harry was confused. No one had ever asked him to do that before. Colin was very enthusiastic, going on and on about Harry's legendary feats, such as how Harry escaped the clutches of the mysterious man, and even asking Harry for an autograph. Yvonne gave Harry a sympathetic look. Not being famous was not always a good thing. Sometimes there was trouble. What Yvonne did not expect was that this little brat, Colin Creevey, would soon have his sights set on her after relaying Harry's legend.
And you're Ivan Howells, aren't you? I've seen the papers these days, and my God, they say you're the savior of werewolves, the greatest potion genius in centuries.
Ivan, why are you so late? Hermione, who was wrestling with a stake, turned to him and asked. Just asking Professor McGonagall a few questions.
By the way, I know you killed a professor called Chino last year.
Colin Clivigau's scream echoed through the corridor, attracting the attention of the young wizards, followed by Lockhart's trademark voice.
What are you two talking about?
Lockhart, garbed in his finery, strode over from the other side of the corridor and pushed his way through the crowd of wizards.
Someone killed a professor which professor died? It was a defense against the dark arts professor by the name of Chino. He was a fraud, an evil dark wizard, who managed to fool everyone with exquisite disguises, but was caught by Hal's.
Colin was very excited when it came to gossip, and did not seem to notice anything amiss with Lockhart's face. In the end, Hales managed to stop Professor Chino from attacking the keeper of the Forbidden Forest, and managed to kill him along with Harry, which is why Headmaster Dumbledore asked Professor Lockhart to replace you this year. Chapter 173. Don't worry, no one in the wizarding world knows how to remove the curse better than you. Lockhart's smile froze. He was not an evil dark wizard, but he was a liar.
You've got to be kidding me.
Lockhart said sheepishly.
Of course not. Professor Dumbledore even gave Gryffindor 100 points for it.
Colin said admiringly. Harry's defeat of you-know-who was great, but these young wizards had no idea who you-know-who was or how scary he was.
Harry did most of the work.
Ivan said without hesitation when Lockhart looked at him.
He performed a charm with both hands, and Professor Chino's face flaked off like butter on a hot iron.
Ivan deliberately made it sound extremely terrifying, specifically describing how Chino's burned and pitted face had disintegrated into pieces.
Professor Chino was clearly alive at the time, and it was you, Ivan, who blasted him to dust with the smashing charm.
Harry protested.
Perhaps.
Ivan said with a shrug, and then turned to Lockhart, whose expression was growing strange.
Actually, even without us, Professor Chino would have been unlucky for all kinds of reasons. According to the seniors, the position was cursed, and no defense against the dark arts professor could have stayed at Hogwarts for a year.
Lockhart's face turned green as Ivan went on and on. He had thought that being a professor at Hogwarts would be a good thing, gilded and prestigious. He hadn't expected it to be so dangerous.
This year is bound to be an exception. How could Professor Lockhart be overcome by a mere curse?
Hermione couldn't resist asking. Hermione had also heard rumors of this from older students, but had always scoffed at them, not to mention the fact that Professor Lockhart had solved countless problems before and would never fall victim to a curse.
Don't you agree, Professor Lockhart?
Hermione asked the new defense against the dark arts professor, but he was nowhere to be seen.
Where's the professor?
Hermione asked curiously.
I saw him heading for the headmaster's office.
Ivan pointed down the corridor, where he could just make out Lockhart's back. Hermione was left speechless for a long moment.
That's not a very nice thing to do, is it?
Harry asked, looking worriedly at a certain imp who was on the verge of tears.
Don't worry, the spell will wear off in a couple of hours.
Ivan explained. He was a pain in the neck when it came to Colin's enthusiasm, but he didn't want to spoil things. Ron quietly fell in behind them, curious about what was going to happen to him if his two friends were so famous.
Colin, did you hear about me while you were at the house?
Ron asked curiously. Colin, who was holding his camera in frustration, looked at Ron blankly for a while.
Who are you?
At the same time, Lockhart hurried to the headmaster's office and gave the password, allowing him to see Dumbledore, who was reading a book. The old headmaster stopped what he was doing and put his long fingers together.
Professor Lockhart, you have less than 10 minutes until your first lesson. Is there something important that brings you here?
Lockhart, who had been intimidated by Ivan, was no longer in the mood for class.
Headmaster Dumbledore, before taking up this post, you never told me that the position of professor in the defense against the dark arts had ever been cursed, and that it was dangerous.
Lockhart began to panic, wondering if he had offended Dumbledore in some way, and wondered if he should run.
Professor Lockhart.
Dumbledore had to interrupt Lockhart to prevent him from continuing.
The so-called curse is just a rumor, and I can tell you in no uncertain terms that most wizards in this position are alive and well.
Lockhart wanted to question him, but Dumbledore did not give him the chance. The centenarian pointed to the open page in his hand and spoke meaningfully.
Besides, if I remember correctly, you mentioned in your copy of Break with a banshee that no one in the wizarding world knows better than you how to lift a curse.
Lockhart then had a clear view of the book on the table, which was one of his autobiographies, Break with a Banshee. On the page that Dumbledore opened, there was a moving picture of himself with a refreshing smile on his face, repeating the same words over and over again. No one in the wizarding world knows how to lift a curse better than I do.
Ah, yes, it seems so.
Chapter 174. Are you sure he's not endorsing toothpaste? In the classroom of Defense Against the Dark Arts. Ivan, who had not seen Lockhart in class for a long time, was very surprised. Did he really resign and run away? There were quite a few young wizards who shared Ivan's sentiments, and more than one or two of them overheard their conversation in the corridor. Word of this long wait had already spread. Only Lockhart-worshipping fans remained confident that their idol would never be frightened off by a mere curse.
Hello, everyone. I'm sure you were wondering where your Defense Against the Dark Arts professor went.
Lockhart lowered his voice and checked the expressions on every young wizard's face. After he had piqued everyone's interest, he spoke in a high voice.
Of course not. I'm Gilderoy Lockhart, Order of Merlin 3rd Class, honorable member of the Dark Arts Defense League, 5x1 Wizard Weekly Most Charming Smile.
There was a smattering of applause from the audience, mostly from the young witches who still had some faith in Lockhart. Lockhart's return was undoubtedly a great boost to Hermione's ego, as she glared proudly at Ron before standing up and announcing loudly.
I knew you wouldn't be afraid of a curse, Professor, because you wrote in your autobiography Break with a Banshee that no one in the wizarding world knew how to lift a curse better than you.
That's right, 10 points to Gryffindor.
Lockhart's face darkened. He was tired of hearing this but had to pinch his nose to give Hermione points.
Then what were you doing in the headmaster's office, Professor?
A young wizard suddenly asked from below the stage. Lockhart looked around and could not find who said it, but it was obviously not a problem for him. He cleared his throat and explained.
That's a good question. After learning of the potential curse on this position, I immediately sought out your headmaster, Dumbledore, to learn the ins and outs of the curse.
Lockhart gave a mischievous wink and then continued.
I bet you can't imagine what I found in the headmaster's office, with Headmaster Dumbledore reading my books in secret. I never would have guessed that this old weasel was a fan.
Harry was stunned when he heard this. He could not imagine Professor Dumbledore admiring Lockhart as much as Hermione did. This must be the craziest thing he had heard all year. Ivan looked at Lockhart, who was speaking freely on the stage, and exclaimed that he was indeed a veteran liar. Not only was he extremely thick-skinned, but he also thought of ways to make up for all the stupid things he had done. In a way, he was quite talented. Lockhart's reputation would not have been destroyed in a matter of months if he had not been so obsessed with fame and had not been so reckless as to commit a number of foolish acts in the original dimension, such as attempting to challenge Snape. Lockhart then spent the rest of the lesson telling the class how he had persuaded Headmaster Dumbledore to divulge information about the curse. At some point, Lockhart asked Neville, who was on his right, to play the role of Dumbledore and play along with him to recreate the scene. It is worth noting that when Lockhart tried to get an assistant, Hermione immediately raised her hand high in the air, but Lockhart pretended not to notice. All he wanted now was to get as far away from the two young wizards who had killed the professor as possible, including their friend Hermione.
It's absurd for Lockhart to claim that Dumbledore was a fan during a lesson.
Harry complained about Lockhart's unrealistic claims as they made their way back to the Gryffindor lounge. Ron nodded his head several times. Although she was frustrated by Lockhart's repeated attacks, she still tried to help him.
That's not necessarily true. Professor Lockhart's writing is so good that Headmaster Dumbledore might read it.
The trio soon got into an argument on the subject. Ivan, who was not part of the discussion, was looking at the homework, or rather a questionnaire that Lockhart had left them, which they would have to complete in their next class. There were 3 pages and dozens of questions.
What do you think, Ivans?
Hermione asked, turning to Ivan for his opinion after a heated argument. Harry and Ron looked over as well, thinking that Ivan would definitely side with them. To their astonishment, however, Ivan was earnestly filling out the questionnaire Gilderoy Lockhart had left behind. By the looks of it, he had completed a third of it. Hermione, on the other hand, happily leaned over to look, but then frowned and pointed out the third question on the paper.
It's wrong here. Professor Lockhart's secret ambition is to rid the world of evil and to sell a range of conditioner, not to promote his toothpaste.
Chapter 175. The Sorting Hat Must Be Crazy to Assign You to Gryffindor. After Hermione corrected her mistakes, Ivan gave up on the treatment altogether and simply placed the questionnaire in front of Hermione, asking her to write it for him.
This is Professor Lockhart's homework, and I'm not going to do it for you.
Hermione protested. In the end, however, the young witch managed to fill up the entire questionnaire, as Ivan's random scribbles were too much for her to bear. On the way back to the dormitory, Harry and Ron looked at Ivan strangely, thinking that he hated Lockhart as much as they did. Ivan, of course, knew what they were thinking and explained to avoid any misunderstanding.
Don't you think Professor Lockhart is very easy to fool? You just have to go along with him, and you'll easily get high marks in every class. Maybe he'll give everyone who likes him an O, outstanding, on their final exams.
Harry and Ron disdained to please Lockhart, but the temptation of scoring points in their final exams does hit home. Besides, it was homework. Even if they didn't want to, they had to fill out the damn questionnaire. The only good thing is that they were able to take Ivan's copy and save a lot of time turning the pages.
Ivan howls.
Rarely ventured outside due to his living in Knockturn Alley, and his unusually forceful and doting mother lacked some courage. Perhaps the Sorting Hat thought that sorting him into Gryffindor House would make up for his character flaws, as Neville did in the book.
We're only halfway there. That's too little, isn't it?
Ivan was surprised. He thought he already knew the castle well, but then he looked at the Marauders map and realized something. There were indeed many places he had not been to, such as the location of the 3 academies. He didn't even fully explore the Gryffindor House Lounge. He never went to the girls' room.
Weird, is someone out?
The plump lady in the portrait moved aside as usual, but when no one came out, she asked curiously. No one replied for a long time, so the fat lady had to block the passage again. Ivan, now gone, wandered through the castle like an invisible ghost, following the directions given by the Marauders' map to rooms that had not been visited. It was possible to do this during the day, but as a second-year student, his frequent entry and exit into the classroom of his senior year was suspicious.
Alohomora.
As they descended lower and lower, Ivan entered the basement, cast a charm to break the lock, and entered one of the potions classrooms. It appeared to be quite spacious, with bottles and jars soaking in an unknown liquid. Unlike the second-year potions classroom, the walls were covered with horrible pictures, but they were too dark to see clearly.
Fluorescence.
Chapter 176, Professor at Hogwarts. Ivan held his wand close to the wall and saw that the paintings were of people in pain, with hideous wounds or strangely twisted bodies, looking extremely strange in the night and the glow of his wand.
That's really Snape's style,
said Ivan, looking at the picture on the wall. If he remembered correctly, Snape had a large number of these drawings in his classroom when he was the defense against the dark arts professor. It is possible that Slughorn, a potions professor at the time, did not like the dark style and asked Snape to bring the ornaments with him. Ding, exploration of potions classroom completed. Current progress 54%. After walking around for a while, the system sounded in Ivan's head, but he did not leave immediately. Instead, he searched the cupboard where the old books were kept. It didn't take Ivan long to find what he was looking for in a pile of books. It was a battered-looking book entitled Advanced Potion Making. Ivan flicked through the pages and saw that they had been heavily altered, with numerous notes and notes in the margins. If it had been anyone else, they would have thought it was a naughty student scribbling nonsense in the book. After all, many of the notes were contrary to the contents of the textbook. Some places were so dark that the contents of some of the textbooks had been crudely crossed out, making it impossible to read. Ivan, however, was well aware that Snape, the most accomplished potioneer in the wizarding world, had used this spell in his student school textbook, along with several other self-created spells.
It's got to be you, hasn't it, Potter? Next time you try to tease me with that cloak, I'm not going to open the door.
The fat lady scowled, then moved aside to reveal a circular passageway. Sorry, I'm not Potter.
11 people, a total of 11 people scored full marks on this questionnaire, of course.
Lockhart was excited when he collected all of the questionnaires and began to review them.
A little bit of a surprise to me.
Lockhart raised his voice. Ivan reluctantly stood up in front of everyone. If he had known, he would not have written the questionnaire.
I didn't think you'd remember everything about me, so I'll give you 20 points each.
Lockhart said happily, ignoring the looks on their faces. He had never expected to find two famous students at the school, both of whom were fans of his, and this made him feel less repulsed by them.
To be honest, I don't mind having an intimate photo with you after class.
Lockhart winked playfully.
No, I have other things to do at the end of the lesson, Professor.
Ivan refused Lockhart's offer of a picture without hesitation. Lockhart looked at Harry in disappointment, but Harry shook his head. When Ivan sat down, he did not receive a system prompt. It seemed that this type of bonus was not well received. This led Ivan to dismiss the idea of relying on Lockhart for GPA this term. Lockhart recovered from his momentary loss, picked up his copy of Wanderings with Werewolves and addressed the room.
Now let's get to class. Today I'll show you how to subdue a werewolf who has lost control. Mr. Neville Longbottom.
Lockhart called out, turning his head to the left of the front row. Lockhart was surprised when Neville, who had moved to sit in the corner, stood up and tried to refuse, but Lockhart did not give him the chance.
Mr. Longbottom, I think you did very well in your last class, so you'll play the werewolf today.
Neville made his way to the front of the class with a grimace on his face, playing along with Lockhart's poor acting, sometimes having to play the part of the dark wizard who had been defeated by Lockhart, pretending to be injured when Lockhart pulled out his wand. Yvonne was enjoying the show. It was good to watch it as a comedy show, not to mention that many of the plots were real, except that Lockhart was not the main character. The diary on the table slowly opened, and the black ink on the page turned into a line of text. Are all the professors at Hogwarts at this level these days, telling stories to their students in class? Yvonne rolled her eyes.
Who do you think gets the credit?
Chapter 181. 181 One of the Dark Lord's lifelong wishes is 3 years ago. Chapter 177. One of the Dark Lord's lifelong wishes is.
Doesn't Lockhart do anything but tell stories? Yes,
Said Ron, biting into a piece of pastry.
I heard that Lockhart had a cage of Cornish pixies for the class to catch.
And
Yvonne asked curiously, putting down her textbook.
It got out of hand, and Lockhart was hung from the ceiling by a bunch of elves. Professor McGonagall was the one who managed to get to him in time and put him down.
Ron shook his head sadly, thinking it must have been funny, but he didn't see it with his own eyes.
No wonder.
Chapter 178. Divine Blade Shadowless Curse.
what were you talking about?
Hermione asked as she slammed her book down on the hall table and gave Ron a look, indicating that he should make room for her.
We had a funny story about Lockhart in class.
Ivan said casually as he sliced a steak.
It's not a story, it's what really happened.
Hermione corrected him and then added a little heatedly.
I had no idea, Professor. Lockhart had so many dangerous experiences before he befriended a werewolf wizard.
Maybe he didn't make it up at the time.
What is it?
Asked Hermione, noticing Ivan staring at her and turning to look at him quizzically.
Wait.
Ivan said suddenly and leaned over. Hermione watched as Yvonne's finger came closer and closer to her cheek, suddenly nervous, but quickly aware that Yvonne merely brushed her finger across her shoulder and then withdrew it. Hermione gave Ivan a suspicious look.
It's nothing, just dust.
Ivan smiled and discreetly held the brown hair in his palm. After lunch, Ivan found a reason to refuse Harry's offer to go with him, and went alone to the tapestry on the 8th floor of the castle. I need a room where I can brew potions and fight. The next moment, however, Ivan opened his eyes to find a large, polished door set into the wall, as if it had been there all along. Yvonne knew her way around the door and pushed it open. The room of requirement was divided into 2 parts, one on the right and one on the right. It looked as if the 2 venues had been forcibly joined together. On the left was a large, ornately decorated training ground, ending in a pile of training dummies and obstacles. On the right were many bottles and jars, as well as a mouthful of phlegm. There were also tools such as forceps and knives. This made the room seem strange, although Ivan had to admit that the room of requirement did satisfy him. After thinking about it for a while, Ivan went to the cupboard on the right and opened it, only to find that the room of requirement had thoughtfully brought all of his remaining potion ingredients. Flipping through her copy of Advanced Potion Making, Ivan found a few tips on brewing Polyjuice Potion on one of the pages. Polyjuice Potion was not a potion that 6th-year students had to learn, but Snape's textbook not only contained information from the book, but also contained research notes on potion knowledge and charm theory. Otherwise, there would not be a self-created charm like Shadowless Blade recorded in it. Grasshoppers,
Shadowless.
Ivan said, casting a spell on the dummy. Without the glorious spell light.
It would be a shame if it contained a countercurse.
Chapter 179, Polyjuice Potion. Ivan was frustrated that, according to the progress he had made in the Gryffindor lounge and the boys' dormitory, he would not be able to push his progress past 70% even if he completed all 3 colleges. In other words, he always had to go to one of the girls' dormitories and the basilisk chamber.
Ivan, do you want to go to the library with me?
Hermione asked after greeting him happily.
No, Ron asked me to play wizard's chess in the dorm, so I'm not going today.
Ivan shook his head, declining Hermione's invitation. Disappointed but not overly concerned, the young witch went on her own way with her daily studies. Ivan waited for a while, then took out the Marauder's map to make sure Hermione was in the library before heading to the room of requirement.
If I'd known, I'd have asked Tom to teach me how to speak snake, and I'd have gone to the Chamber of Secrets.
Yvonne scowled at
Hermione,
in her boys' school uniform. However, Ivan sighed and resigned himself to his fate. He used the transfiguration charm to modify the uniform according to his impression of girls. This was because Ivan was not sure if he would be able to learn the language on his own, and his impression was that Dumbledore was the only one who could understand it on his own. The rest of the group were born with Voldemort's blood, inherited from their ancestors, and Harry's was due to Horcruxes. Furthermore, Tom's willingness to teach was another matter.
Well, it's supposed to be like this. The skirt is too short and it's perfect for the knees, and the collar needs to be altered.
Ivan repaired it with a transfiguration charm, trying to recreate Hermione's outfit as best he could. Fortunately, Hermione was not the type of witch who liked to dress up, so she usually wore the standard school uniform. After changing her clothes, Ivan looked into the full-length mirror again. He felt that the little witch in front of him was a little different from the Hermione he remembered, and it took him a while to slap his head.
Harry, you suck at chess.
Ron said as he kicked a bearded Dumbledore off the board. Ron had to admit that seeing this gave him a sense of accomplishment, as if he had actually won the wizarding war.
Ron, you're too good. Next time you should play with Ivan.
Harry put away the broken pieces and shook his head.
I'd have to be able to find him.
Ron grumbled. During the first few days of school, Ivan seemed to have vanished into thin air, except when he was in class or sleeping. Ron was cleaning the board when he turned around and saw Hermione coming into the lounge with a book.
Hermione, have you seen Ivan today?
yes.
Yvonne was stunned. I'm right here, aren't I? Ivan immediately realized the change in his status and, recalling Hermione's tone, snorted and glanced at them.
How would I know where he went?
Chapter 184, 184 You want to do it hard's 3 years ago. Chapter 180 You want to do it hard.
Hermione, I thought you were going to the library to read, and why did you knock? Why didn't you just come in?
Lavender.
Ivan muttered to himself. He hadn't expected Hermione's room to be behind a random door he had chosen. The main problem was that the effects of the Marauders map were greatly reduced upon entry to the lounge, as hundreds of names were located in this small area. To avoid suspicion, Ivan never checked the Marauders map again. Ivan, however, forced himself to calm down and soon came up with an excuse.
I just remembered I forgot something, so I came back.
Ivan said, pointedly ignoring the knock.
Oh, I see.
Lavender didn't look suspicious and moved aside. Yvonne forced herself to go inside. The decor of the girls' room was very different from the boys' room. It was very pink and girly, and several undergarments were strewn across the chair. As it was Saturday, Parvati was not even up yet, lazing around in her pajamas reading the latest issue of the magazine. Yvonne glanced around casually, then her eyes were drawn to the large and small animated stickers on the walls. Because the sticker shows countless Lockhart smiling at him.
What are you looking at, Hermione?
Asked Lavender, leaning forward curiously and placing her hand on his shoulder. Didn't she say she'd leave the book? Yvonne was about to make up an excuse to get away with it when Lavender spotted the papers Hermione had left on the bedside table. Ivan thought this was bad, but he couldn't stop Lavender, who grabbed it out of curiosity.
What's this, Professor Lockhart's events?
Asked Lavender, looking excitedly at the stack of newspaper cuttings. Yvonne was about to berate Lavender for asking her to return the items when he spoke up.
Well, I didn't know there were reports of Harls.
Ivan was momentarily stunned. He glanced at the newspaper that Raven was holding and saw that this was indeed the case. Other than the news of Lockhart's book signing and his appointment as Professor of Defense against the Dark Arts, the rest of the newspaper collection consisted of his own newspaper articles. Judging from the quantity, the collection should be quite complete.
Where, I want to see it too.
Parvati's eyes lit up and she jumped out of bed, not caring if she was naked or not. She went to Lavender's side, grabbed a couple of the cut newspapers and started reading.
That's enough, bring them to me.
Ivan snapped, his face black with anger. No matter what, it was Hermione's secret to keep it safe. It was her privacy, and Yvonne was beginning to regret her intrusion.
No.
Lavender said with a grin, clutching the stack of cut newspapers to her chest.
Unless you tell us who is more important to you, Professor Lockhart or Harls.
How can an idiot like Lockhart compare to me? Ivan grumbled to himself but didn't dare to say so, as he was in Hermione's form and it would be rude to talk about it.
You sure you don't want to give it to her?
Ivan asked, sighing at the gossipy faces of the two young witches.
Yes, no.
Parvati hurriedly raised the object in her hand high, without any intention of returning it.
Looks like you guys want to do this the hard way.
Ivan muttered to himself. Yvonne instinctively tried to pull her wand out, but then she remembered that her wand was not the same style as Hermione's and would most likely be seen through. With this in mind, Ivan abandoned the idea of using magic and rolled up his sleeves, revealing his white arms.
Hermione, what are you doing?
Lavender was vaguely frightened by Ivan's actions, but quickly calmed down when she saw Parvati. There are two of us. As Lavender was trying to cheer herself up, she saw
Hermione.
Coming at her with the clear goal of getting her hands on the newspaper. Lavender said with a grin, clutching the stack of cut newspapers to her chest. Unless you tell us who is more important to you, Professor Lockhart or Harls. How can an idiot like Lockhart compare to me? Ivan grumbled to himself but didn't dare to say so, as he was in Hermione's form and it would be rude to talk about it. You sure you don't want to give it to her? Ivan asked, sighing at the gossipy faces of the two young witches. Yes, no. Parvati hurriedly raised the object in her hand high without any intention of returning it. Looks like you guys want to do this the hard way.
Parvati, come and help, Hermione's mad.
Let go and give me the paper, or you're both dead.
Boo-hoo.
The three of them fought a fierce battle in the small dormitory, and the scattered newspapers fell everywhere.
Oh dear, what do we do now?
Chapter 181, Hermione in the Quantum State. Ivan was suddenly troubled. If only he could cast memory charms, two of them would make them forget what had just happened. Only it's obviously too late to learn.
Fast recovery, newspapers flying.
Ivan waved the wand he had captured from Lavender in frustration as he dealt with the chaos around him. The newspapers scattered on the floor had long since become crumpled and broken, but under the charm of the restoration charm, they were quickly repaired and smoothed out. They transformed into paper butterflies and fluttered down onto Ivan's outstretched right hand. Ivan arranged the newspapers in chronological order and placed them on the head of the bed, so as to recreate Hermione's previous arrangements. With that done, Ivan turned his attention to Lavender and Parvati, trying to think of a way to keep them safe. After a moment's hesitation, Ivan put one hand on his hip and pointed his wand at them, threatening them.
All of you listen up. The newspaper is a secret. You'd better forget about it and never speak of it. Do you understand?
Lavender and Parvati pursed their lips, assuming that Hermione didn't want it to be known that she was secretly collecting news clippings from Lockhart and Hulse. However, they were clearly not going to give in and did not reply. Ivan could see what they were thinking, so he tapped the cup on the table with his wand, turning it into a marmot. Once again, Ivan grabbed the marmot by the scruff of its neck and threw it into the cage where the owl was kept.
You see, if anyone so much as mentions it again, I'll turn you into a marmot and put you in a cage.
Ivan's gaze swept over the two young witches. Lavender and Parvati looked at the cage. The cup-formed marmot was beating its tiny paws on the bars of the cage in terror, letting out heart-stopping shrieks.
Also, don't mention this in front of me again.
Lavender and Parvati were baffled, but they nodded under Ivan's threatening gaze, tears in their eyes. They didn't want to be caged as groundhogs. Ivan felt a pang of guilt as he realized that he had broken the peace in the girls' dormitory. They were all damned system missions. Ivan sighed as the system's prompt sounded. Ding, Gryffindor Station has been explored. Current exploration progress 63%.
Want to play chess, Ivan? It's no challenge playing against Harry.
Ron said eagerly.
Okay.
Chapter 182, Practicing the Animagus.
I'm sorry, Professor McGonagall, but it seems I'm a little late.
Ivan apologized as he closed the door.
No, I haven't been here that long.
The tabby cat opened its mouth and spoke in human language, then leapt lightly to the ground. Its body continued to expand in midair, and within a second or two, it had transformed into a middle-aged witch wearing dark green robes and square spectacles. Ivan's eyes burned with envy at this ability to switch between two forms at will without the use of a wand or incantation. Professor McGonagall adjusted her square spectacles and walked back to the lecture table. So, before we begin our lessons, I must ask you a question. What do you know about Animagus? Yvonne thought for a moment, then spoke solemnly.
Animagus is a high-level transfiguration spell used by wizards on themselves.
I'm sorry, Professor McGonagall, but it seems I'm a little late. Ivan apologized as he closed the door. No, I haven't been here that long. The tabby cat opened its mouth and spoke in human language, then leapt lightly to the ground. Its body continued to expand in midair, and within a second or two, it had transformed into a middle-aged witch wearing dark green robes and square spectacles. Ivan's eyes burned with envy at this ability to switch between two forms at will without the use of a wand or incantation. Professor McGonagall adjusted her square spectacles and walked back to the lecture table. So, before we begin our lessons, I must ask you a question. What do you know about Animagus? Yvonne thought for a moment, then spoke solemnly. Animagus is a high-level transfiguration spell used by wizards on themselves. There is no need to cast spells or use a wand after mastering the skill. The magical effect is to transform oneself into some sort of animal, most of which is used to detect or evade danger. Few people are wary of an ordinary creature.
Well said, but you left out a few others. The first Animagus is usually limited to ordinary creatures, and the transformation into a magical creature has unpredictable consequences.
I'm sorry, Professor McGonagall, but it seems I'm a little late. Ivan apologized as he closed the door. No, I haven't been here that long. The tabby cat opened its mouth and spoke in human language, then leapt lightly to the ground. Its body continued to expand in midair, and within a second or two, it had transformed into a middle-aged witch wearing dark green robes and square spectacles. Ivan's eyes burned with envy at this ability to switch between two forms at will without the use of a wand or incantation. Professor McGonagall adjusted her square spectacles and walked back to the lecture table. So, before we begin our lessons, I must ask you a question. What do you know about animagus? Yvonne thought for a moment, then spoke solemnly. Animagus is a high-level transfiguration spell used by wizards on themselves. There is no need to cast spells or use a wand after mastering the skill. The magical effect is to transform oneself into some sort of animal, most of which is used to detect or evade danger. Few people are wary of an ordinary creature.
Of course, the danger is not constant, and the higher the level of your transfiguration, the lower the risk.
Ivan, on the other hand, didn't care about the risk of the transformation that McGonagall mentioned. He was confident in his transfiguration skills, and he also had a temporary buff like the Academic Genius Experience card. However, Professor McGonagall's request to report this to the Ministry of Magic troubled Ivan. Ivan grimaced. He didn't want his animagus transformation to become public knowledge, which would greatly diminish the value of the spell.
Can I not report it?
Ivan gave him a discreet questioning look, but Professor McGonagall ignored it. Ivan was not discouraged. Professor McGonagall's silence meant that she would not interfere, so it was up to him to register.
Professor McGonagall, is potion making necessary?
Yvonne asked. The other steps were more tedious and could be solved, but it was more difficult to bury the potion in one place and wait for the storm. Who knew when the storm would come around here? It would not be good to go abroad and hide the potion in a stormy area, right?
Not really.
Professor McGonagall said, shaking her head.
But it will greatly reduce the difficulty and danger of the practice, and unless you are confident in your transfiguration skills, such as Headmaster Albus's, you will do well to follow the steps.
Professor McGonagall waved her wand in the air, and the light of her magic flowed through the air, slowly morphing into several half-human, half-monster creatures with twisted forms and pained expressions.
These are the wizards who have failed in their transfiguration, and there is nothing that can be done to restore a wizard who has failed in his transfiguration.
Professor McGonagall was very serious, not joking at all, and warned Ivan that if he did not want to become like this, it would be best not to do it in private. Ivan dismissed his earlier unrealistic belief that his transfiguration was better than Dumbledore's, even under the effects of the experience card. McGonagall placed a young emerald leaf in front of Ivan.
These are the leaves of the mandrake. You should be grateful that your Professor Sprout has recently brought in a batch of mandrake, saving you a lot of trouble.
Professor McGonagall paused for a moment, then smiled and said,
As for when exactly to begin, that's up to you.
Chapter 183, Does He Know?
Thank you, Professor McGonagall.
Ivan said, bowing. Professor McGonagall reservedly stated that she was only doing what a transfiguration professor should do.
Anyway, you can do some preparation work this term and wait for the right time. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me.
Professor McGonagall said. Ivan left the transfiguration classroom with a mandrake leaf and a notebook for his animagus practice. He did not return to his room, but headed for the room of requirement. I need a suitable place to practice my animagus.
It's actually real soil.
Ivan squatted on the ground and picked up a pile of soil. It felt no different from the soil outside. It was quiet enough, though, and undisturbed, but what about the storm? Yvonne was deep in thought when a sudden clap of thunder split the sky. It was deafening, and when she looked up, all she could see were thick, dark clouds. In an instant, heavy rain began to fall, and the howling wind caused the trees to sway. Ivan was amazed at the power of the room of requirement, which was able to create such a large space out of thin air and restore the special astronomical phenomena of the outside world. Swish! Ivan fired a magical beam of light into the sky, and for a long moment it hit a firework that exploded into red smoke. However, he did not know how the weather of the storm formed.
Ivan, what's wrong? Are you not feeling well?
Harry asked curiously at Ivan's strange behavior.
Well, it's nothing, I feel fine.
Ivan said vaguely, slurring a leaf in his mouth.
Are you sure you don't want to go to Madame Pomfrey's?
Ron asked worriedly.
No.
Ivan said, shaking his head and refusing their offer. He then sliced off a piece of steak and chewed it slowly. He felt that after a month, the mandrake in his mouth would probably taste good. Could this thing really be used to make special potions? Ivan grumbled to himself as he stopped half of his previous exploratory missions. His previous experience with Polyjuice potion had taught him that it was not an all-purpose potion, and he would not be able to undo it if he were to experience it again. It was better to wait until the animagus transformation had been completed, and then explore, as Peter Pettigrew did in his mouse form, coming and going as he pleased within Hogwarts. However, this was on the premise that he was a small animal in his animagus form. If he were to take the form of a stag, everyone at Hogwarts would know that something was amiss. With that in mind, Ivan turned to look at Hermione, wondering if she knew what he was doing in the dormitory. However, he was vaguely aware that Hermione seemed to have grown distant from him.
Hermione, why are you avoiding Ivan so much lately? Did you have a fight?
Harry couldn't help asking, feeling that something was wrong with his two best friends.
Did they have a falling out? No.
Hermione shook her head, dismissing Harry's statement, then hesitated before turning to Ron and asking.
Was Ivan playing wizard's chess with you Saturday morning?
Yes, we've been playing wizard's chess all morning. Why?
Chapter 184, Arguing and Hanging the Golden Bells. After a few days of torment, Yvonne was able to settle into a routine of holding a blade of grass in her mouth, and other than a bit of difficulty brushing her teeth and eating, she was no different from normal. Ding, after a period of study, your transfiguration spell proficiency has increased. Transformation spell level 4, 1599 out of 1600. After reading Professor McGonagall's notes, Ivan heard the sound of his proficiency increasing. Seeing that his transfiguration could reach level 5 with just a little more proficiency, Ivan worked even harder, but for the next few hours, he did not see any improvement in his proficiency. Ivan realized that he had reached a new bottleneck.
Ivan, do you want to go to Quidditch practice? Harry says it's the first training session of the school year.
Ron asked as they headed out the door. Yvonne thought about it for a moment, but nothing else seemed urgent, so she nodded in agreement. And if he remembered correctly, he was awarded GPA for winning a Quidditch match in his last term. Before leaving the dormitory, Ivan thought of something and threw a wand at Ron.
Ron, I've fixed your wand.
Ron caught it, and when he looked at the wand again, the middle had been completely repaired, just like before. Ronan tried to swing it twice in the air, and a magical beam of light struck the ground and exploded into sparks.
God, this is great.
Ron said happily, meaning he wouldn't have to be scolded when he got home. Ron hadn't expected Ivan to fix the wand when he gave it to him, but he was pleasantly surprised, and he seemed to think it was better than it was.
What did you do to my wand? The spell I just cast seemed a little more powerful than it was. It's a simple enhancement.
Ivan said diffidently. It wasn't easy for Ivan to find research material, and he didn't want to waste it, so he tossed Ron's wand around for a long time and experimented on it. For example, trying to construct an enchantment loop inside the wand to amplify the power of the spell, only to have the wand almost explode on the spot. In the end, after a lot of modifications, the result was neither a success nor a complete failure, as he was able to complete the strengthening of the circuit. It was only because Ron was too weak that he was able to sense that the power of his spell had been enhanced. Apparently, the experiment requires more material.
What's going on here? Harry, didn't you say it was Gryffindor's turn to book the stadium? Why are they here?
Ron asked, looking around curiously. The Slytherin captain, Marcus Flint, stepped forward, patted Malfoy on the shoulder and addressed the crowd.
That's because we have a new seeker, and Professor Snape has given us special permission to train on the pitch today. And my dad bought a new broom for Slytherin, so you always have to get the hang of it.
Malfoy said in an odd tone. The Slytherin team laughed and showed off their new brooms, 7 Nimbus 2001s. The lights of the local tyrants blinded everyone.
At least we Gryffindors get in on our own merits, rather than having to buy our way into the team.
Hermione said sarcastically when she saw Malfoy's smug smile. Malfoy's face darkened and he scowled.
Nobody asked you, you stinking little mudblood.
How dare you?
Alicia of the Gryffindor Quidditch team shrieked at Malfoy. Ron angrily tried to punch Malfoy, but Wood pulled him back. George and Fred rolled up their sleeves, and the rest of the team looked furious.
Mudblood is a nasty adjective, used by some purebloods as a slur against Muggle wizards.
Ivan explained, frowning. Like Hermione, he was not a pure-blood wizard and was not particularly fond of the term Muggleborn, but he could not ignore Malfoy's almost discriminatory remarks. Malfoy, now protected, hid behind it triumphantly, as if he intended to say more. It was there, without warning, that Ivan attacked, waving his wand and pointing it at Malfoy.
Hang the golden bell upside down.
Chapter 185, Untitled. In an instant, Malfoy's body was turned upside down, suspended in midair above the pitch, his voluminous robes dragging on the ground in reverse gravity.
What have you done to me? Put me down.
Malfoy screamed in terror. Several Slytherin students came forward and pulled at his robes and clothes, trying to pull him off, but to no avail. They even tore Malfoy's sweater and robes.
That's enough, don't touch me.
Malfoy was furious with the unhelpful Slytherins and covered the holes in his clothes with both hands. The Gryffindor team was appeased by Malfoy's sorry state, and George patted Ivan on the shoulder.
Ivan, good for you. What kind of magic is this? It looks like fun.
Yvonne was about to explain when Marcus stepped forward and scolded her.
Hales, how dare you cast a spell on Malfoy? Put him down.
Ivan shrugged, not caring about Marcus's words at all.
What are you waiting for? Get in there.
Malfoy screamed at the Slytherins, who were staring at him angrily. Marcus hesitated, but the Slytherins behind him, for the sake of their new brooms, pointed their wands at Ivan, and the lights of various charms flew out.
An incisor. Tongue lock. Thunderbolt tap dance.
Despite their misgivings, no one dared to cast a spell of destruction. However, being hit by a bunch of jinxes was clearly not going to end well. The Gryffindor team members did not expect their opponent to attack so suddenly and were too slow to react. By the time they pulled out their wands to support Ivan, all kinds of charms were already hitting him.
Ivan!
Hermione shrieked in concern, but her expression quickly turned to shock, her brown eyes wide with disbelief as she stared at the scene before her. As the spells closed in, a barrier of magic appeared around Ivan, and when the spells touched him, they all went back the way they came.
You.
Marcus drew his wand and pointed it at Ivan, but hesitated, as the Slytherins behind him had set a good example.
I didn't do it this time,
said Ivan, throwing up his hands to show that he hadn't done anything. Ivan, however, thought better of it and, not wanting to make a big deal out of it, used his wand to undo the effects of Slytherin's magic, leaving Malfoy alone. The Slytherins, having made a fool of themselves, looked at Ivan with a mixture of anger and fear. It was only then that they recalled the rumors circulating around the school. Their previous defense against the dark arts professor, Chino, was said to have been blown to smithereens by this young wizard.
I suggest you apologize to Hermione, or you may have to hang yourself for the rest of the day, or at least imagine that someone can save you.
Malfoy's face flushed as he was stared at. As a proud pureblood, Malfoy would rather die than admit his mistake to a mudblood, and even threatened to tell old Malfoy and Snape about it and expel Ivan from Hogwarts.
Are you sure?
Yvonne's expression was strange, and if his memory served him correctly, Snape was the one who could not tolerate the insulting term.
Mudblood.
It was because of Snape's words that Lily, who had been close to him, broke off all ties with him and began to date Harry's father, James Potter. If Malfoy were to tell Snape about this, he would probably get a beating.
Professor Snape is not here at the moment. Besides, you'd better think about what you've just said. If any of the other professors hear you, you'll be put on house arrest.
What have you done to me? Put me down, Malfoy screamed in terror. Several Slytherin students came forward and pulled at his robes and clothes, trying to pull him off, but to no avail. They even tore Malfoy's sweater and robes.
As for now, apologize to Hermione.
Chapter 186, Can I Try? Ivan pretended to be fierce, but for a moment he didn't know what to do with Malfoy. Ivan soon thought of a way to intimidate him and turned to Harry and the others who were watching the commotion.
What about Colin, the one who likes to take pictures? Why don't you get him over here and take some pictures of Malfoy?
George, who was watching the commotion, thought that this must be very interesting, so he went to look for Colin with a strange smile. Malfoy began to panic. He didn't believe Ivan would dare to do such a thing, but he didn't want to risk becoming the laughing stock of the school. Malfoy's face turned green and then white. It took him a while to force the words out of his mouth.
Mud.
Malfoy didn't look happy about it, and his face twisted.
Never mind, Ivan, put him down. If Professor McGonagall sees him, you'll be punished too.
Hermione said, shaking her head. Ivan looked at her for a moment, then nodded and waved his wand, causing Malfoy to fall out of the air and eat a mouthful of mud.
George, come back, you don't have to go.
Yvonne called out when she saw that George was halfway home. Colin was annoying. If he knew anything, the whole school would know. On the other side, a very tough-looking Wood shouted at the Slytherins.
Get out of here, this is Gryffindor territory.
Marcus's face darkened, and he was about to tell the Slytherin team to leave when Malfoy, who had just got up from the ground, spoke indignantly.
Why should we? This is not Gryffindor territory.
Ron eagerly pulled out his wand. He had long wanted to teach Malfoy a lesson. George and Fred looked at each other with amusement. Marcus frowned and tried to stop Malfoy, but Malfoy interrupted.
This is the Quidditch pitch. Whoever loses must get out of here. Do you dare come?
Malfoy couldn't stand it any longer and shot Ivan a challenging look. He was well aware of the gap between his abilities and Ivan's, so he had to settle for Quidditch. The Slytherin team members were also tempted. There were many senior students among them, but they were all humiliated by Ivan, a young wizard. Marcus, who had intended to try to dissuade her, fell silent. A Slytherin team with a new broomstick has little chance of defeat, and they do have the right to train, so there is no need to back down.
Ivan's not on the Gryffindor team.
Wood explained, stepping forward to refuse. After all, 7 2001s were more than enough to greatly improve the Slytherin team's capabilities, and Gryffindor had little chance of winning until a strategy of restraint was developed. Unfortunately, before he could say anything, George shouted at him.
Let's see who loses. That's right, so what if it's a new broom? You can't win a Quidditch match with a good broom.
The excited Cubs had no intention of backing down either, not to mention Ivan's earlier performance, which had slapped Slytherin in the face and greatly boosted their confidence. Wood sighed and said nothing more. He felt that it would be good to meet Slytherin in advance, and even if he lost, he would be able to find out how much of a speed advantage the Nimbus 2001 had so that he could plan tactics for the official match. A little disgrace at best.
Can I give it a try?
Ivan asked, turning to Wood. Wood looked blank for a moment, then troubled.
Are you sure you want to play? You haven't been in any of the training sessions, and you can't work with the team. It doesn't matter.
Ivan said confidently.
I know the rules of Quidditch, and Madame Hooch was very pleased with my flying talent during my flying lessons.
Hearing this, Wood became more confident in Ivan, thinking that he might be another flying genius like Harry. On top of that, Wood wasn't confident he could win this time, so after thinking about it, he told Ivan.
Ask them, see who's willing to make room.
Ivan turned to look at the Gryffindor team and was about to question them when Fred threw his broom at him.
What do you think of betters?
It's nice, I hear you can hit people in this position.
Yvonne teased as she took the old clean sweep 5.
If you aim right.
Fred shrugged. Beaters could not hit people directly, of course, or the game of Quidditch would change from playing to hitting people. However, if the beater was good enough, they could clear the opposing team by hitting a bludger. Only it's not easy.
I thought you were just going to hide down there and watch, Harles.
Malfoy, who had previously felt sorry for Ivan for not being a player, was excited when Ivan volunteered to play. This meant that he would be able to humiliate the other party later.
I can't help it if you want to humiliate yourselves.
Ivan said nonchalantly as he held the 5 stars that he had just obtained. Malfoy was furious, the Slytherins were furious, they exchanged glances and soon came to an understanding.
Well done, Ivan. You've taken Fred's place, so join me in getting rid of them one by one.
Chapter 187, I Malfoy will die with you today. Ivan took to the air on his broomstick, following the Gryffindor team. The Slytherin team was not to be outdone, and Ivan even saw Malfoy give him the finger, which he must have learned from someone. Begin, as the 2 captains released the bludgers, quaffles, and golden snitches, the game officially began. Angelina and Alicia, the chasers, charged ahead to snatch the quaffle from the Slytherin team, while Harry tried to locate the golden snitch. Ivan moved around the pitch, and beaters generally had one task, which was to protect their team from bludgers with the help of a bat. In particular, they had to focus on protecting the Seeker, in case they were knocked out of the game and the golden snitch was lost. However, Ivan soon discovered that if he continued to slack off, the practice match would be over. The Slytherins, with their new broomsticks, flew so fast that the 2 young Gryffindor witches, who were chasers, were overwhelmed by the Slytherin chasers. Surrounded and cornered, the quaffle that Alicia had managed to get her hands on was snatched away.
Good for Ivan.
Fred said, nodding grimly. He thought Ivan must have decided he couldn't get away from the Slytherin team and decided to use this tactic to get rid of the 2 Slytherins. Wood sighed, he should have expected Ivan to be targeted by Slytherin. He should never have let Ivan play. Although the entire stadium was enchanted to prevent the players from falling to their deaths, Ivan would have to lie in the hospital bed for days if he were to fall to the ground.
Guys, look.
Ron shouted in excitement. Hermione quickly turned to look, her brown eyes wide with shock.
That's impossible.
Wood exclaimed, his jaw dropping. As he watched, Ivan, who was inches away from the ground, forcibly reversed the direction of his broom, tilted his body, and glided low over the ground, his robes trailing behind him. Wood was absolutely certain that it was a miracle that even regular players could perform such extreme movements. Behind Ivan, 2 beaters who had been following him crashed into a pillar with a shriek of terror. The crash hurt Ivan's ears alone.
That's great.
Fred exclaimed, jumping up and down. Malfoy, who had also been keeping an eye on the situation, was stunned and furious when he saw that Ivan was not only uninjured, but also in the limelight. Malfoy gave up on trying to track Harry down to find the golden snitch and stormed towards Ivan. Before the match, Malfoy and the Slytherin team had reached a consensus with their eyes. Then the game can be lost and Ivan must die. When the Nimbus 2001 drives at top speed, its speed is astonishing.
Malfoy, aren't you the Seeker? Why are you chasing me? I, Malfoy, will die with you today.
Chapter 188, Why Are You All Chasing Me? Seeing Malfoy charging at him with a determined look on his face and his life on the line, Ivan was baffled. Are you crazy? Ivan simply did not understand how much his earlier actions had hurt Malfoy's young mind. Even more unacceptable to Ivan was the fact that the remaining 4 Slytherin players seemed to have been inspired, and even the keeper abandoned the door and charged at Ivan.
Together, knock him off. We can lose the game, but Ivan Howells must die.
Ivan was speechless when he saw a large group of Slytherins approaching him. Why are they chasing me instead of playing ball? Ivan had no choice but to ride on his 5-star clean sweep all the way, taking advantage of the fact that he was in experience card mode and had superb flying skills. At one point, they flew so low over the obstacle course that many Slytherin players were scared to get too close, in case Ivan got them again. Malfoy was the only one who almost ran into the barrier in his relentless pursuit.
Foul, you're breaking the rules. Make them stop.
Captain Wood shouted angrily at Marcus.
I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do.
Marcus threw up his hands to show that there was nothing he could do, and Fred was about to punch him. Just as a fight was about to break out, the situation on the field changed. Harry, riding the Nimbus 2000, came to Ivan's aid and managed to pin down the two Slytherins. This allowed Ivan to find his way to the bludger and begin his revenge.
Malfoy, catch.
Ivan cackled as he swung the bat at Malfoy with all his might. The bludger, which was the size of a man's head, closed in on Malfoy, who did not have a bat. Fortunately, Ivan intervened, and Malfoy was able to react in time, dodging the attack a second before it hit him.
Hails you.
Malfoy was about to mock Ivan when he heard a cry of pain from behind him.
Ah.
Malfoy looked over his shoulder and saw that one of the Slytherins that had been following him had been smashed by a bludger and had fallen off his broom.
What were you going to say, Malfoy?
Ivan asked with an amused smile. The bludger was not meant to be aimed at Malfoy, as it was difficult to hit a direct hit, but Slytherin, who was close behind, had his sight blocked by Malfoy.
Don't forget, you don't have a ball to hit now.
Malfoy said through gritted teeth as he continued to ram Ivan. Ivan was now swinging his bat, which was meant to be as good at hitting people as it was at playing ball. Since the Slytherins were the first to break the rules, he was not stupid enough to stick to them. Take that, Ivan muttered to himself as he swung the bat at Malfoy. Malfoy was scared out of his wits and managed to get out of the way with a quick liftoff. The tables were turned as Ivan ran after Malfoy, while the remaining Slytherins were held back by George, Angelina, and the others. Their broomsticks, however slow, could not hold out against such a large force, and no one could come to Malfoy's aid. However, Malfoy's broomstick was so fast that Ivan could not do anything about it.
Hails, come on, keep going.
Malfoy noticed that Ivan couldn't catch up with him and started to float again, once more giving Ivan the finger.
Ivan, catch.
Alicia the Chaser threw a quaffle. Ivan caught her drift, gave Alicia a thumbs up, and threw the quaffle at Malfoy, this time in the face.
Harles, you're breaking the rules.
Malfoy threw his head in his hands and cursed, not caring that he had broken the rules himself. The quaffle flies past Malfoy, and in the distance, another innocent Slytherin lands.
Bravo, Hals.
Alicia flew over and high-fived Ivan. George followed suit, bringing the bludger over for Ivan to play with. Ivan, once again pretending to hit Malfoy, cleared the room.
Foul, you're breaking the rules, make him stop. I can't tell them what to do.
Wood said, trying to suppress a smile. He did what Marcus had just done and spread his hands, indicating that there was nothing he could do. Hermione, Fred, and the others vented their anger, and Ron kept his eyes on the sky to see what Ivan would do to Malfoy. Malfoy noticed that he was the only Slytherin left on the field, and became flustered, but still shouted at the top of his lungs.
What do you want? What do you think?
Chapter 189, Everything is for Victory. Malfoy was surprised when Ivan didn't stick him in the face, but when he opened his eyes, he was horrified to see Ivan holding him aloft. Originally, Malfoy had been so arrogant that he had threatened to kill her. As Ivan gained speed and dived to the ground, Malfoy broke down and clung desperately to Ivan's leg, afraid that he would knock him to the ground.
Ayla.
Malfoy's scream echoed through the sky. It didn't work out the way Malfoy thought it would. Ivan just flew him along for a while, then landed smoothly.
I'm going to tell my dad.
Ivan was speechless and his joy at his victory vanished. He was just a snotty little kid crying his heart out, and there seemed to be no joy in winning. Marcus was embarrassed by Malfoy's outburst and looked at Ivan with mixed feelings. He did not expect Ivan to be able to counterattack one by one, despite being cornered by 7 Slytherin players. Ivan's flying skills were not inferior to that of regular players. Marcus was even more shocked by Ivan's uncanny ability to hit the ball. If he couldn't limit Ivan's play during the next official match, he might as well not play at all.
That was a really good game you played. I'm definitely going to suggest to Professor McGonagall that you join the team. With you around, we're definitely going to win this year.
But the team's full, isn't it?
Yvonne asked, considering her GPA for the end-of-term settlement. He remembered that Fred liked to play, and he felt bad about taking his place.
That's all right, you can have my spot, as long as it helps us win this year's Quidditch championship.
Fred waved his hand, indicating that he was willing to give up his spot, and even smiled widely, much to Ivan's confusion. With that agreed upon, Wood came up with a strategy, and while there was still time, directed the group to practice it. The core of this tactic was to use Ivan's uncanny ability to hit the opposing team's seeker with a bludger, and then the outcome of the match would be decided by them.
What?
Harry gaped at Wood. Why was he being beaten?
You're the best seeker in all of Hogwarts. If Ivan could knock you down, he could certainly knock out the other team's seekers.
Wood exclaimed as he patted Harry on the shoulder.
It will also help you train your dodging skills, so that you won't be targeted by beaters from other teams.
Harry opened his mouth to say something, but when he saw the look in Wood's eyes that said,
All for victory.
He mounted his broom in frustration. During the rest of the training session, Harry suffered and was beaten up by Ivan. Ivan tried to hold back, but Wood was shouting at the top of his lungs, and his voice, amplified by the resounding charm, could be heard throughout the stadium.
Hales, hurry up, fly faster and hit that way. Push, have you not eaten today? Aim and hit him, Potter won't last long.
Hearing Wood shouting at the top of his lungs, Ivan wondered if Harry had offended him in some way during his usual training. But then he shook his head, as Wood was probably desperate to win the Quidditch championship. During the school year, Gryffindor won 2 matches in a row, with Harry joining them. Unfortunately, due to the threat of Chino at the end of term, Dumbledore suspended all large-scale school activities, including the Quidditch final. With his addition, Wood was determined to win.
Fight, don't hold back.
Harry shouted at Ivan, having realized this. Yvonne nodded and used all her strength to speed away from Angelina's group, knocking the bludger away and sending it hurtling through the air towards Harry. However, due to Harry's prodigious ability to fly and George's constant protection as a beater, even Ivan had trouble hitting him. During the course of the afternoon, Harry was shot down several times. It was only thanks to Wood keeping watch and readying himself to use the levitation charm that Harry was not sent to the hospital wing. Ivan did not enjoy being a member of the Quidditch team for long, as he soon realized the trouble of being a member. Because of his daily Quidditch training, he had a lot of spare time. More crucially, Ivan knew in his heart that he was nowhere near as good at flying as Wood, and the others thought he was. The reason why he was able to stand his ground against a group of Slytherins on a Nimbus 2001 was largely due to his enhanced mental acuity and control over his body. However, Wood treated him like a true genius at Quidditch, much to Ivan's frustration, and he was forced to waste many of his GPA points on training. Fortunately, Ivan's flying skills improved by leaps and bounds after 2 weeks of intensive training, and several times his usual learning speed. Under normal circumstances, he would not have been able to fly as well as the gifted Harry, but he would have been able to hold out against George and the others for a long time. On the principle of not wasting GPA, Ivan used the experience card less and less. This resulted in Ivan's condition being extremely unstable over the course of a dozen days of training, with his level going up and down. Wood was baffled. Others got better at flying the more they trained, but Ivan got worse and worse at flying.
Fine, then we'll suspend training for a few days.
Ivan insisted, and Wood relented. More crucially, the days of training had made Harry a sitting target, and he desperately needed a break.
Hugh, a break at last.
Harry grumbled, relieved to be out of practice.
Can't Captain Wood have another target? It's always me.
Who asked you to be the best player on the Gryffindor team? George and the others can't hide from my bludgers.
Yvonne said teasingly.
Come on, I'm not as good at flying as you are.
Chapter 190, What is this, a cuckoo? A day passed in the blink of an eye. Ivan waited until the full moon hung high in the night sky before he went invisible and stood on the platform. He looked at the steps recorded in his notes and took out the mandrake grass that he had kept in his mouth for a month. He then took out a crystal bottle and placed all the complicated ingredients he had prepared into it. Under the moonlight, the slightly murky potion glowed faintly, and Ivan could clearly feel that under the influence of the astronomical phenomenon, the potion in front of him seemed to have undergone some subtle changes.
Next, I hope the storm created by the Room of Requirement really works.
Ivan muttered to himself, then put the potion away and used the secret passage from the rooftop to the location of the Room of Requirement on the 8th floor. With a wave of his wand, Ivan transformed a section of dead wood into a shovel and began digging the hole, finally burying the potion in the hole. With all the preparations done, Ivan set the time of the storm, adjusted the power to maximum, and left the Room of Requirement. It was not until the evening of the third day, when Ivan re-entered the Room of Requirement, that he was greeted by a violent gale. With a sudden clap of thunder and a shower of rain, Ivan ran to the burial site. In order not to damage the crystal bottle, Ivan had to dig with both hands to clear the mud away. Despite the cold rain soaking his body, Ivan did not care. He would only wipe his eyes with his equally wet sleeve when the rain flowed down his forehead.
Clean it up.
Ivan reached out and tapped his robe with his wand. The rain slid off his robe as if it were alive. It must be said that magic is sometimes incredibly convenient.
Amador animo animados.
The strange tone echoed through the dense forest, and there was a faint echo in the distance.
Wasn't it a unicorn?
Ivan only had time to make this judgment before he was cut off by the crushing weight that came from his body. In the card's mode, Ivan could clearly feel the magic flowing through his body. As had been the case with the analytic animal, Ivan.
So,
Every muscle fiber and even cell structure in his body, as the magic flowed in. Ivan tried to say something, but all that came out were strange noises that gave him a very bad feeling.
Bah, what have I become, a cuckoo chicken?
Chapter 191. I'm the most familiar eagle on Hogwarts Road.
Night owls, why did I turn into this? That's impossible, isn't it? Wouldn't it be nice to have a phoenix or a thunderbird or something?
Ivan said helplessly, standing by the pool and looking at his reflection in the water. As the transformation was completed, the system prompt sounded in Ivan's mind. Ding, your transfiguration skill has been upgraded to level 5, 3 out of 3200. Ding, special magic, Animagus Transfiguration Owl unlocked.
I know I'm turning into an owl, but can't you just call me something else like an owl?
Ivan complained as he read the Animagus Transfiguration name in the system. Perhaps sensing Ivan's request, the system changed from the Chinese interface to the English interface so that there was no need to worry about other names, as they were all the same word.
Well, owls it is.
Ivan sighed. Now that the Animagus form had been confirmed and could no longer be changed, Ivan quickly accepted this fact and began to study how this form could help him. The most important of these was stealth. The owl was a wizard's best animal companion and was found all over the wizarding world, so he could go anywhere he wanted disguised as a messenger owl. To Ivan's slight displeasure, owls could not cast spells at will in their form. Although he still possessed magic, it was impossible to perform magic without the help of a wand, gesture, or spell. This made combat power in this state very worrying.
Coo 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 to deliver a letter.
Is a postman owl.
Gummy cuckoo, I'm so hungry I can't fly anymore.
Is a skinny owl.
Coo 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 coo.
Is an owl owned by Slytherin. While most of the owl's cries were useless nonsense, there were occasional snatches of interesting information. For example, the password to enter and exit Slytherin's dormitory today. This discovery pleased Ivan greatly, as it meant he could visit Slytherin's dormitory. As Ivan prepared to act, a gray and white owl with an envelope tied to its leg flew past him. Ivan was stunned and turned his head abruptly.
Coo 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 coo. Hey, where are you going? Do you need me to show you the way?
Ivan tries to communicate with the other in his own unknown level of eagle. The gray owl glanced sideways at Ivan and cooed. Yvonne's eyes lit up. He had been worrying about not having a suitable identity to explore the girls' room. This was a good opportunity.
How about I deliver your mail? It'll give you a break. I'm the best hawk on Hogwarts Road, you know. Everyone says I'm the best messenger for eagles.
Ivan cooed.
Coo, no, I must deliver the letter myself.
Chapter 192. Why are you making things difficult for an owl who came to deliver a letter?
Wait, I haven't even asked who it's for.
Ivan said, suddenly thinking of the serious question. Fortunately, the newspaper in his mouth gave him a clear hint that few people in the whole school would subscribe to such a thing, and she was probably the only Ravenclaw student. They flew all the way to Ravenclaw's lounge, where Ivan stepped on the eagle knocker. After hooking the newspaper in his paw, Ivan used his beak to tap the knocker, indicating that he was in a hurry to ask questions.
What is the nature of magic?
The eagle asked, its beak opening and closing as a mysterious voice spoke from within. Ivan was stunned. The eagle asked, its beak opening and closing as a mysterious voice spoke from within. Ivan was stunned. Shouldn't you be asking which came first, fire or phoenix? Can I just skip over and answer the next question? Ivan asked, not giving up. However, the latter was unmoved and repeated the question like a recorder. What is the nature of magic?
What are you, a repeater? Why are you giving a poor owl who's only here to deliver a letter a hard time?
Ivan demanded, hopping on the bronze knocker in an attempt to persuade it to let him in. How could I possibly know the answer to that question? Ivan was frustrated. He had not expected that the questions he had used to make things difficult for Tom Riddle would one day get him into trouble. If the Dark Lord of the Fifth Year couldn't figure it out, Ivan had no idea.
Cuckoo, what are you doing here? Of course it's an answer. I'll think of an answer soon and then I'll go inside.
Although he had no idea, Ivan pretended to be relaxed.
Coo, why are you answering the questions? Why don't you just fly in through the window?
The black owl cooed strangely. Ivan was silent for a while, then he said arrogantly.
Because I am a very wise owl who can answer questions.
The black owl gave him a strange look, then slipped through the window.
Why is Luna here? This is troublesome.
Ivan was halfway through the flight when he saw the little witch sitting in the corner of the lounge, flipping through a newspaper. Ivan had a headache. He wanted to use the letter as an excuse to explore the other party's dormitory and complete his mission. Now it's more trouble.
There is no such thing as a snorkack or a crumple-horned snorkack in this world.
A young Ravenclaw girl in the lounge reprimanded arrogantly.
No, there is, we just haven't found it yet.
The witch who answered had messy, waist-length, blonde hair, a necklace made of cork, and a wand in her left ear. It was that particular get-up that allowed Ivan to recognize her in the spacious lounge. It was Luna, his target for the newspaper.
I think it's normal for a harasser to be in a state of anxiety and annoyance.
Luna explained in a trance.
Are you accusing me of being a harasser?
The Ravenclaw girl demanded angrily. Luna looked at him in surprise, her expression clearly saying, "How can you be a harasser? That thing can't grow to your size."
Crazy girl.
Luna pretended not to hear him and looked away. She picked up the newspaper and started reading again, not caring that she had flipped it upside down. Perhaps there is an unusual pleasure in reading it this way.
Y'all, my hair clips.
The girl turned to glare angrily at the gray-white owl, which was clutching its clip in its talons. After noticing the newspaper in the owl's mouth, he suddenly realized something and scolded Luna.
You must have made it do it, didn't you?
I didn't command it.
Luna said again, her voice sounding strange, as if she were singing a ballad.
Life is full of the unknown, so why did you assume that harassing hooligans didn't exist? Just like you didn't think an owl would try to tease you, did you?
Chapter 193. Your owl fell halfway and can't come. Luna's strange words left the Ravenclaw unsure of how to react, so he muttered.
Crazy girl.
Under his breath and angrily went off to find his hair clip. Ivan had already attached the hairpin to Rowena Ravenclaw's bust, and it would probably take him a while to get his hands on it without the use of the flight charm. It was also a small test of wisdom, and he believed that a proper Ravenclaw would have found a way to overcome it. Ivan sided with Luna on the spur of the moment because he felt bad for injuring her owl. With the newspaper in her mouth, Ivan flew to Luna to finish his task of delivering the newspaper.
Thank you.
Luna thanked her earnestly, then looked at the quibbler in Ivan's mouth and asked curiously,
Why are you delivering the newspaper? Where's my father's owl?
despite the fact that the owl in front of her was also grayish-white and physically similar to her father's, Luna immediately recognized it.
He fell and couldn't make it, so I helped him deliver the letter.
Ivan muttered to himself, not expecting her to understand. To her surprise, Luna looked surprised and murmured.
Owl wrestling, I've never heard of it.
Yvonne stared at the witch in shock. How was this possible?
No, I don't understand.
Luna shook her head, the cork dangling from her neck swaying with her movement. Yvonne was baffled. She couldn't read the young witch's mind, and if she couldn't, how would she know what I was talking about? Luna reached over and removed the copy of the quibbler from Ivan's mouth. She had been waiting for this latest issue for a long time, so she flipped it open. After Ivan finished delivering the newspaper, he planned to fly away and look for someone who had left their window open. However, he stopped when he saw the front page of the quibbler. The title on it shocked him so much that his eyeballs fell out.
What? I don't exist.
Scowling, Ivan stepped closer with his little paws to see what was written there. Luna didn't mind having another newspaper-eating animal and graciously laid the quibbler down flat. This undoubtedly facilitated Ivan's reading, and he was rendered speechless after perusing the book. It was unknown who wrote the article, but it was full of conspiracy theories. It stated that Ivan Hals, a supposed potion genius, was most likely a cover for the Ministry of Magic to smooth over werewolf tensions, and that the wolfsbane potion did not exist. The reason was that it was impossible for an 11 or 12-year-old wizard to have developed something like the wolfsbane potion.
But the ministry always has to find something to do, whether it means something or not, doesn't it?
Ivan's mouth fell open. He hadn't said anything, and he hadn't felt any magical vibrations from the Dementor. Could this little witch read the owl's expression? Luna didn't reply this time, but muttered to herself as she read the paper.
Yes.
With that, Luna stood up, put the newspaper away, and headed back to her room. Ivan flapped his wings and followed her. He needed to visit her dormitory, so he landed on Luna's shoulder to hitch a ride. Luna didn't seem to mind at all, chatting about harassing hooligans and crumple-horned snorkax, and discussing where these magical creatures were most likely to appear. This exchange between man and bird attracted the attention of many Ravenclaws, who cast curious glances at them. If it had been anyone else, the wise Ravenclaw would have suspected that something was amiss. However, Luna's usual style of dress was very unconventional, and she was known for having strange, non-existent creatures. Some even wondered if the Sorting Hat had made a mistake in assigning her to Ravenclaw.
That's strange, where's my dirigible? I remember putting it here.
Luna stepped forward and looked at the empty basin beside the bed in surprise.
Maybe someone stole it and hid it.
Yvonne suggested after a moment's thought. He remembered that in the original timeline, due to Luna's strange behavior, many people liked to tease her, hiding her things or throwing them away.
Then she must also think the dirigible Lee is nice.
Chapter 194, Character Keys and Clues. Ivan rolled his eyes. He didn't understand how beautiful Luna's dirigible was, but she obviously didn't get it for that, and expecting her to return it would be a dream.
Thanks for showing me around. I guess I'll have to leave now.
Ivan complained as he flapped his wings and flew into the air.
Why did you leave?
Luna asked, looking at him curiously, making Ivan uncomfortable. Ivan was wondering if he had been exposed when he heard the little witch speak in her ethereal voice.
That won't do, you haven't delivered the letter yet, have you?
Delivery?
Ivan rolled his eyes, remembering that he had told Luna that he was delivering the letter in place of her father's owl.
Like that, the owl that looks like you stole your letter and knocked you out cold.
Luna looked surprised, but when she turned around, Ivan was nowhere to be seen. Going to the window, Luna looked out and saw that the strange owl had flown away.
Thank God I slipped away fast.
Ivan muttered to himself as he changed direction and flew away. he still had to go to the boys' dormitory.
Receive your reward.
Ivan said. The next moment, a series of strange symbols appeared in Ivan's mind. The characters were extremely strange and did not appear to be written in any of the languages he knew, nor did they appear to be written in an ancient magical script.
The character is the key.
Ivan muttered, reciting the information the system was feeding him. Even then, Ivan had no idea. The hints were too few. What the hell does that mean? How can a string of characters be a key? Where was the door if it had a key? Ivan was very upset. With a thought, he suddenly remembered the mission, Bloodline Mystery. When he opened the system column, he found that the mission progress had changed. Mission, Blood Mystery. Objective, find a way to fuse multiple bloodlines. Current task progress, 15%. Task reward, legendary points *1. Progress increased by 10%? Ivan was stunned. It seemed that his previous guess was correct. Completing the exploration mission was indeed a breakthrough. If he could understand the meaning of these characters, he might be able to find a way to fuse many bloodlines. With that in mind, Ivan went to the library to look up books on writing and see if he could decipher the characters. As for pushing the mission to Hogwarts to 100% to get more information, Ivan had no such idea. Hogwarts was too big and too mysterious. He had explored all the places he could go, but even so, he had only managed to push the mission to 71%. Yvonne felt that even if she stayed for 7 years, she might not be able to see the whole castle. A few days passed in the blink of an eye. While Ivan was in the library looking up the meaning of the characters, Wood restarted his Quidditch training, summoning the team to the Quidditch pitch in the evening. Given the potential for school and legend points, Ivan had to take some time off to continue practicing his flying skills. After an afternoon of training, Ivan was about to head back to his room to shower when he was stopped by a sneaky George and Fred.
What's wrong?
Yvonne asked, looking at them curiously.
Do you remember when we asked you to be our special advisor last term?
George said mysteriously.
Of course.
Yvonne said, and then seemed to think of something and asked.
Is your wizard wheezes officially open?
Yes.
George and Fred said in unison.
We found the right place to use as our base.
George said happily, and Fred went on.
That's why we wanted to invite you to see.
They found the room of requirement, thought Ivan at first, but when he followed them to the so-called secret base, he discovered that this was not the case. It was a storeroom that seemed to have been abandoned for a long time. It was the size of a classroom and was filled with many items needed to make magic tools.
Fred and I found this place by accident. We've been watching it for a long time, and it hasn't been visited in a long time, so we tidied it up and used it as a temporary proving ground and station for the Magicery. It looks good,
said Ivan, nodding at the half-completed merchandise on the table. Fred excitedly pointed to 2 of the new props and introduced them to Ivan.
It's a decoy bomb. Once thrown, it goes everywhere, perfect for causing chaos. That's Subing Fireworks, one of our masterpieces. Thanks to the ideas you gave us over the summer and 200 galleons for research funding, we're able to come up with so many interesting things.
Chapter 195, The Inheritance Knowledge of a Pureblood Family.
I'm offering a paltry offer,
Ivan said, shaking his head rather than taking credit. He knew very well that George and Fred would have come up with these things in the future even without him, but he had pushed it forward.
Come on, we all know how good you are.
Fred said with a grin, thinking Ivan was being modest.
I told you before that it would be the right thing to do to invite Hals to be our special advisor.
George picked up a well-made bonfire and offered it to Ivan, indicating that he would give it a try.
So, wanna experience our handiwork?
Yvonne took it from him. It looked like a Muggle world firework on the outside, but it was made of rough red leather and hadn't had an icon printed on it yet. In his previous life, Ivan had been very interested in these interesting magical tools, and now that he had the opportunity, he wanted to experiment with them himself. After fiddling with it for a while, Ivan figured out how to activate it. He injected a little magic into it, and the tip of the tube in his hand emitted a dazzling spark. Red fireworks then followed, trailing scarlet sparks in the air.
It's not over yet. If anyone tries to stop them with a vanishing charm or any other spell, they'll be in for it.
George introduced them to each other with a sinister smile as he used the stunning spell on a stray blammer. There was a flash of light from a charm, and the fireball that had been hit suddenly expanded and burst.
Magical witch.
And another magical prop that can turn an entire corridor into a swamp. Ivan remembered that it was called a portable swamp, and when released, it could turn the entire corridor into a swampy landscape. If used well, it was a completely strategic weapon. It has to be said that using these things for practical jokes is such a waste.
By the way, George, how do you make these interesting things?
Ivan asked, curious about the source of their knowledge. Even with his level 4 alchemy knowledge, he could not create a portable swamp, but George and Fred did.
Fred and I accidentally found a lot of old books in Dad's study before we went to school, and we learned how to make these props from them.
George said, a legacy from a pureblood family. Yvonne thought of the flying muggle car she had seen at the beginning of the school year, which seemed to have been personally modified by Arthur Weasley, George and Fred's father. With this in mind, Ivan became more interested in the magicery that the pair had founded.
By the way, Ivan, what do you think of that bang bang?
Fred asked hopefully.
It's nice. I think there'll be lots of naughty young wizards who'll love it.
Yvonne said, recovering quickly. These were all good for creating explosions and chaos. Improving them to make them more powerful would do the trick.
That's what we thought too.
George nodded and then happily chatted with Ivan about their sales plan, as well as the subsequent improvements and research on magical props. Ivan, combining his knowledge of sales in his previous life with his Muggle world, gave them advice, some of which were even more advanced than those currently used in the Muggle world. Even though it was all theory and Ivan had no practical experience, it did not stop George and Fred from understanding it. At first, they were able to participate in the discussion, but soon it became Ivan speaking alone.
I just wanted to ask, is there anything you don't know? Don't say that, I just read a lot. I read about it in some Muggle books, and Muggles are much better at making money than we are.
Ivan said hesitantly, shrugging.
If there's one thing I don't know, of course there is.
George and Fred were curious. Ivan waved his wand, and the magical points of light formed a strange symbol in the air, one of the many symbols the system had given him.
Have you ever seen anything like it?
Ivan asked.
No, it looks like some sort of character. Is it a new kind of magic?
George shook his head, indicating that he had not seen it either.
Maybe we should try to etch it into a magical material and see what happens.
Fred suggested. Ivan nodded and quickly experimented with it, rearranging a few of the characters in his head and trying to infuse them with magic. Nothing happened.
Well,
Chapter 196, Why Don't You Sell Your Arms? However, after careful consideration, Ivan concluded that the rune-like object was not meant to be used as a magical tool. Ivan was confident he could tell.
Are you sure? I don't think I'm doing anything special as a special advisor.
Ivan was surprised. These magical tools were studied by George and Fred, so Ivan did not want to take advantage of them. George nodded and said,
Of course, Fred and I decided this together. You've helped us a lot with all the ideas you've given us.
Fred added this as well.
Besides, we didn't thank you for helping us get a ministry order during the summer holidays, or Mother would have burned all our research.
George and Fred smiled at each other and told Ivan about the interesting events at the burrow.
When Mom saw the 50 galleons you gave us, she thought we were up to no good. She didn't believe us when we told her it was a ministry deposit.
Ivan did not expect that his request for a gold galleon from Macker would lead to Mrs. Weasley accepting George and Fred's research, and he recalled that Mrs. Weasley hated it when they did not do their job properly.
So you're completely free to do whatever research you want.
Yvonne was genuinely pleased for both of them.
Something like that.
Fred nodded. Soon, however, Fred wilted like a frosted eggplant and smacked his lips.
But Mom demanded that all of our homework for this term be E+, or she wouldn't let us study it.
Ivan shrugged, indicating that there was nothing he could do. George and Fred were actually quite good students. However, it was indeed a little difficult for them to do research while learning. George and Fred were upset for a while, but soon recovered. There's still a long way to go before the end of the year. There's still time to work harder.
So you deserve a third of the shares. Well, if you say so.
Ivan said, seeing no reason to refuse. Due to her status as a special consultant, Ivan would not simply brush them off with theoretical knowledge he had seen in his previous life. Instead, he seriously gave them advice. For example, early magic tricks workshops could make quick sales with practical tools such as automatic quills and skiving snacks. After all, homework and lessons were the worst things for most young wizards.
In that case, someone will have bought our dung bombs, and the house that lost the game will certainly need them to vent their anger.
George suddenly thought.
Yes, bang pyrotechnics can actually be used to beat people up.
Fred was getting very excited. Ivan stared at them, speechless. Why learn magic when you're so good at it? You might as well be arms dealers. There's bound to be money to be made. Ivan, however, had to admit that their idea was good and joined them in discussing the details of the sale. After chatting for a while, Fred suddenly spoke mysteriously.
By the way, when it comes to Quidditch, why don't we do what we did last time and have a good bet? I'll do it this time. I don't have to compete or train, so I have plenty of time.
Ivan was stunned for a moment and then looked at Fred with a strange expression. No wonder Fred had so readily given up his position when he joined the team. It was because of this. However, hearing Fred's words, Ivan was more or less tempted. No one could have too much galleon. He may have made a lot of magic tools a few months ago and sold them like hotcakes, but this was a profit for the shop. Ivan couldn't just take whatever he wanted, and the research costs couldn't always be extended to his family. The money earned from selling the wolf venom potion was his. However, due to the cost of the early publicity, most of the galleons were squandered on it, or the daily profit would not have been covering him every day. Furthermore, it is not only the British Isles that have werewolf wizards in the wizarding world, but the whole of Europe and even the whole world, so the promotion is a huge hit.
What do you think? Fred and I will pay 100 galleons as capital.
Compared to the scrimping and saving of the previous year, when he had only saved 5 galleons as capital, George was very generous this time.
Sure, I'll give you 100 galleons as well.
Ivan agreed without hesitation. These 100 galleons were mostly a surplus of money that Asia earned when she bought the book for him, and the remainder she earned by selling wolfsbane potions. With 200 galleons as their capital, George and Forder both threatened to pull off a major stunt that would not satisfy their appetites.
It's too bad we had to play Slytherin last time. I think most people will bet on Gryffindor.